And so we settle in. You can feel your body beginning to grow heavy in the most pleasant way. In our time together tonight, there is nothing to examine and nothing to understand, only the gentle rhythm of a story. A story that begins not with the crash of a wave or the clang of a sword, but in the deep, quiet stillness that came before it, starting in a place that felt like it would never change at all. Before we drift too far, if you feel a connection to this place, you're welcome to leave a quiet like or subscribe. Think of it not as a task, but as leaving a soft footprint in the sand before you continue your journey inward. Your peaceful presence here is, and always will be, more than enough. And as you consider that, you might even let me know in the comments what city you're listening from, and what time it is there. It's a quiet comfort to imagine all us, in our own peaceful corners of the night, connected by this shared stillness. Alright, let the shadows in your room grow long and soft. Maybe you can hear the faint sound of your own breathing, and together, let's allow the story to begin. The first thing you notice is the smell. It's a thick, layered scent of wood smoke, damp earth, and something else, something warm and alive. It's the smell of cows. You open your eyes, but it doesn't help much. The world is a deep and hazy twilight, even though the sounds you hear suggest the morning is well underway. There are no windows in this place you call home, just a long slatted opening in the peak of the high ceiling, where a lazy column of grey smoke makes its slow journey towards a patch of pale sky. You are lying on a raised wooden platform that runs along the wall of a very, very long room. Your blanket is a single piece of heavy, scratchy wool. And the pillow beneath your head is, well, there is no pillow. You push yourself up, your joints cracking in the cold morning air. Down on the central earthen floor, a long fire pit smoulders, its embers glowing a cheerful orange in the gloom. This single fire is the heart of the house. It's the kitchen, the heating, and the only source of light. It's also a terrible air purifier. You and everyone who has ever lived in one of these longhouses have long seasoned by a lifetime of wood smoke. A cow lets out a low, mournful sound from the far end of the building. That's right, your roommates are livestock. In the harsh winters of this land, bringing the animals inside is just common sense. It keeps them from freezing, and their body heat helps warm the space. A clever two-for-one solution that modern home designers have, for some reason, failed to embrace. You live in the human end, they live in the animal end. A low wooden partition suggests a line that is not to be crossed, though the smell clearly didn't get the message. You swing your legs over the side of the sleeping bench. The air is much colder down on the floor. You can see your breath. A woman, her hair in two long braids that fall to her waist, is stirring a large pot over the fire. That's your mother. She doesn't look up, but she knows you're awake. In a space this shared privacy is an idea as far as a window. Your father is already outside, his heavy footsteps having woken you an hour ago. Two younger children are still lumps under their own wool blanket. This is your world. Not a kingdom, not a country. Just this farm, nestled in a green clearing at the foot of a deep, dark fjord. The water is a short walk away. A vast slice of cold, grey-blue water with steep, tree-covered mountains rising like giants on the other side. You are a farmer, or more accurately, the child of a carl, a free farmer who owns this land. You work it, you live a few neighbors, other families in other longhouses scattered a few miles apart. But this building, this plot of earth, is your universe. You walk over to the fire, the packed dirt cold beneath your bare feet. Your mother ladles a scoop of greyish, lumpy porridge into a wooden bowl and hands it to you. It tastes exactly as it looks. But it's warm, and it will fuel the day's work. As you eat, you look around the cavernous room. Along with your family, a few other people share this space. A cousin whose own farm failed last season. An old man who helps mend tools in exchange for a place by the fire. Sleeping on a simple straw pallet much closer to the animal section is a young man who is not free. He is a thrall, a servant. His parents were captured in a raid on some distant shore a generation ago. His life is one of service, but the lines are blurry. He eats the same bland porridge as you do. He shivers in the same cold. Historians, centuries from now, or argue endlessly about the exact nature of this society. Was it a rigid caste system, or a more fluid world of obligations and honor? It's just life. He is a part of the household, just a part with fewer choices. Finishing your breakfast, you pull on a simple leather tunic and step towards the one opening in the longhouse, a heavy wooden door. As you push it open, the full glory of the morning hits you. The air outside is so clean, so sharp, it feels like drinking from a mountain stream. It's a stunning contrast to the smoky cocoon you just left. The sun is climbing over the mountain opposite the fjord. It's like turning the surface of the water into a glittering carpet of diamonds. The world feels immense, ancient, and deeply, deeply peaceful. You stand there for a moment, breathing it all in. Nothing ever changes here. The seasons turn, the crops grow, the winter snows fall. It's a hard life, a simple life. And as you look out at that calm, silent water, you have absolutely no idea that it's about to become the highway for an age of chaos, an age that will carry your people and your world to the very edges of the map. The quiet of your morning is a fragile thing. It's soon broken by the rhythmic thud as axe splitting logs for the fire, and the distant, bleating complaints of the sheep being led to pasture. Another day begins, identical to the one before it. You spend the morning weeding the small field of barley, your fingers numb from the cold, damp soil. Your back already aches with a familiar, dull pain. This is the reality of your life, endless, repetitive work, dictated by the sun and the soil. Lunch is more porridge, perhaps with a piece of hard, dry bread if it's a good week. The afternoon is spent mending a fishing net, your fingers working the coarse thread until they are raw. As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the fjord in shades of orange and purple, a different kind of activity begins. A small group of men from a neighboring farm are making their way towards your longhouse. They aren't here for a social call. They walk with a purpose, their faces grim. Your father meets them by the woodpile, and you stop your work, pretending not to listen but catching every word that drifts on the cooling air. They speak of ships, not the simple fishing boats you know, the ones used to catch cod and herring in the fjord. They speak of something bigger, sleeker. They talk of a chieftain, a man named Olaf, who had his ambition and his unsettling, hungry eyes. Olaf is building new ships, they say, and he is gathering crews. The men's voices are low, a mixture of fear and excitement. They speak of lands across the great expanse of water to the west. Lands they have only heard of in half-remembered stories from traders who ventured beyond the sight of the coast. Lands with no mountains, they whisper, so flat that the sky feels bigger. And the people there, they are soft. They build their holy places not on high, remote hills, but on open, undefended shores, and they fill them with treasures, not iron axes or wool blankets, but things made of silver and gold. Your father is a practical man. He scoffs. Fool's tales, he says, but his voice lacks its usual conviction. The sea is a graveyard. Why risk your life for a shiny cup? One of the men, a weary fellow with a patchy beard, steps closer. Because, Bjorn, he says, his voice a conspiratorial whisper, my cousin's brother sailed with the crew last year. They went south. They came back with so much silver they didn't have to farm this season. This gives everyone pause. Not farming for a season. The idea is so ludicrous, so utterly foreign. It's like imagining a man could fly. To not work the land is to starve. To feast all winter is the stuff of dreams. You glance at your family's own small store of dried fish and salted meat, already thinking about how thin the portions will be by the time the snow melts. The men talk for a while longer, their words painting pictures in your mind. Pictures of sandy beaches, strange buildings with high, thin towers, and men in long robes who carry no weapons. It sounds like a child's story, fantastical and unreal. But the way they speak of the silver that feels real, the weight of it. That night, the longhouse feels different. The air is still thick with smoke, but now it's laced with a new tension. Your father is quiet, staring into the flames of the long fire, his brow furrowed. Your mother works, her movement sharp and agitated. Even the thrall seems to be listening, his usual sullen expression replaced by one of cautious curiosity. You lie on your sleeping platform, the scratchy wall pulled up to your chin, but sleep doesn't come. The whispers have planted a seed in your mind. You try to imagine a world without these mountains hemming you in, without the relentless cycle of planting and harvesting. A world where your fortune isn't tied to whether a late frost kills the barley crop. Historians will later call this the push and pull factor. The push was the land itself. Scandinavia in the late 8th century was getting crowded. Good farmland was scarce, and powerful chieftains were consolidating their power, pushing out smaller landowners. Life was precarious. The pull was the allure of the outside world. Europe was a fractured, wealthy, and largely unsuspecting prize. Its trade routes were flourishing, its monasteries were unguarded repositories of wealth, and its political defenses were focused inward, against rival kingdoms, not outward towards the sea. You, of course, know nothing of this grand geopolitical reality. You just know that your back hurts, the porridge is bland, and the idea of a life with more silver than you can carry is a dangerous, intoxicating thought. You also think about the risk. The North Sea is a monster. For every story of a crew that returned rich, there are unspoken stories of ships that simply vanished, lost to a sudden storm, swallowed by a great wave. Their crews now feasting in the halls of the sea god, Aegir, at the bottom of the ocean. To leave the farm is to gamble with the gods. To stay is to accept a life of certainty, the certainty of back-breaking labor in the constant, gnawing anxiety of a bad harvest. You close your eyes and see the fjord, that calm, grey-blue water. It has always been a boundary, the end of your world. But now for the first time you see it as something else. A road, dangerous, and impossibly tempting road to a different life. The whispers on the salt wind have done their work. The world is no longer just this farm. It's bigger, and you are beginning to wonder what lies on the other side. The whispers don't fade. In the weeks that follow, they grow into a low, persistent hum that seems to underlie all the familiar sounds of the farm. The talk of Olaf's new ships is everywhere. It's in the way the men pause their work to speak in low tones, the way they look out at the fjord with a new kind of speculation in their eyes. Then, one day, the abstract talk becomes an unavoidable reality. A message arrives from unavoidable reality. A message arrives from unavoidable reality. Each of the major farms in the region is expected to contribute lumber, labor, and, eventually, men for its crew. Your father, as a landowning call, is obligated to answer. And so, you find yourself walking with your father to a wide, stony beach a few miles down the fjord, a place you've never been before. As you round a wooded bend, the sight stops you in your tracks. It looks like the skeletons of great beasts are lying on the shore. 3 long, curved spines of wood are laid out on blocks, the beginnings of 3 long ships. Men are swarming over them. The air filled with the sharp scent of fresh-cut pine and the rhythmic sounds of hammering, sawing, and the steady thwack of axes shaping timber. You are put to work immediately. Your job is simple, tedious, and crucial. You help fell tall, straight oak trees, chosen for their strength, to form the keel, the backbone of the ship. You watch in as the master shipwright, a man whose hands are gnarled and stained but move with an artist's precision, directs the placement of this single, massive piece of timber. He sights along its length with one eye closed, as if he can see the finished ship already slumbering within the wood. Then comes the part that truly defines these vessels. The planks. They aren't just nailed edge to edge. Instead, each plank is painstakingly riveted to the one below it, overlapping it by an inch or so. This is the famous clinker build or lapstrake hull. It looks like an upside-down wooden roof. Your job is to help hold these long, flexible planks in place while others drill holes and hammer in the iron rivets. The constant thump, 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 thump of the hammers becomes the new rhythm of your days. It's grueling work, but as you do it, you begin to understand the genius of the design. A ship built this way is incredibly strong, yet surprisingly light and flexible. It's a hull that can bend and twist in the violent waves of the open ocean, absorbing the shock of the water instead of shattering. It rides high in the water, which means it has a shallow draft. You hear the shipwright explaining it to your father. She'll be able to sail up a river as easily as she sails the sea. We can land her on any flat beach, no need for a deep harbor. The military and tactical advantage of this is lost on you, but the simple elegance of it is not. This isn't just a boat, it's a key that can unlock the entire coastline of the world. As the days turn into weeks, you learn more. You learn that the gaps between the overlapping planks are stuffed with tarred animal hair, usually from a sheep or a goat, to make them watertight. You spend an entire afternoon helping to mix the foul-smelling pint tar and stuff the sticky wool into the seams. It's a messy, disgusting job, but as you do it, you realize you are literally waterproofing the ship with the stuff of your farm. A part of your land is going into this vessel. There's a strange mix of practicality and what feels like magic in the air. The shipwright doesn't just use measurements. He charts as he works. He carves small, intricate symbols, runes into the keel before it's laid, meant for luck and protection from sea monsters. One of the strangest pieces of knowledge you pick up is about finding the right wood for the ribs of the ship. They don't just cut curved pieces from a large log. The shipwrights search the forest for trees that have grown with natural bends and curves, or find large branches that are already shaped by nature. They believe the wood retains its natural strength this way. Historians will later confirm this technique, noting that it made the frames of Viking ships far stronger than those made from artificially shaped timber. It's a deep, intuitive understanding of the material, a partnership with the forest itself. The prow of the ship begins to take shape, rising from the keel in a graceful, menacing curve. The men carve it into the snarling head of a dragon or a serpent, its mouth open in a silent roar. The work is intricate, detailed, and utterly terrifying. Looking at it, you understand that this ship is not built for fishing. It's a weapon. It's designed to inspire on fear before the first man even steps ashore. The name for these ships, you learn, is Lang Skip or Long Ship. But the men call them DRIKR dragons or SNEKKE serpents. They are not just vessels, they are living things. One evening, as the light fades, you are sitting on a log, rubbing your sore shoulders, and you overhear a debate. Two of the older builders are arguing about the sail. One insists a single, large square sail is all they need. The other talks of a new technique he has heard of, something that would let them angle the sail to catch the wind from the side. The debate is fierce, technical, and mostly over your head. But it's a reminder that this technology is not static, rapid innovation. People are experimenting, pushing the limits of what a ship can do. Whether this specific ship will have the most advanced rigging is a matter of fierce debate, a debate that historians, looking at ship remains a millennium later, will also be having. Finally, the day comes when the first ship is ready. The hull is tarred black, the dragon head is painted in garish colors, and the long, slender body rests on rollers pointing towards the water. It looks hungry. The whole community gathers to watch. With a great, coordinated heave, the men push the ship down the beach. A cheer goes up from the crowd. You, standing there with sawdust in your hair and tar under your fingernails, feel a strange sense of ownership. You didn't just watch this ship being built. Your sweat and aching muscles are part of it. The bones of this long serpent are now a part of you. And as you watch it bobbing gently on the tide, a terrifying thought creeps into your mind: you might just be one of the men who has to sail it. With the ship now floating in the fjord, a palpable shift occurs in the community's mood. The abstract threat of a voyage has become a tangible wooden reality. Before any journey can begin, however, the gods must be consulted. The venture must be blessed. Olaf, the chieftain, declares that a blotte sacrifice will be held to honor Thor for strength, Njord for a safe sea passage, and Odin, the All-Father, for wisdom and victory. You and your family are required to attend. The gathering takes place in a clearing deep within the woods, a place the locals call a harrow. There's no temple or grand structure here, just a circle of moss-covered standing stones and a large, flat-topped boulder in the center that serves as an altar. It's stained dark from years of similar rituals. The air is heavy and smells of pine and damp earth. As dusk settles, torches are lit, casting long, dancing shadows that make the trees at the edge of the clearing look like silent giants. The chieftain Olaf presides over the ceremony, Volva. She is old, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, and she wears a cloak adorned with raven feathers. Her presence commands a nervous respect from everyone, even Olaf. She is a seer, a weaver of fates, a direct line to the gods. Whether these women were formal priestesses or more like freelance shamans is something future scholars will endlessly debate, but for you in this moment her power is undeniable. The ceremony begins with chanting. Low, guttural sounds that seem to rise from the earth itself. The Volva leads the chant, her voice surprisingly strong, and the assembled crowd murmurs the responses. The words are ancient, and you only understand half of them, but you feel their power. They speak of the world tree, Yggdrasil, of the 9 realms, of the eternal struggle between the gods and the giants. This is not a faith of quiet contemplation. It's a living, breathing cosmology, a grand, violent, and often chaotic drama in which humans are minor, but not insignificant players. Then comes the sacrifice. A large, healthy horse, the finest from Olaf's own stock, is led into the center of the circle. Its mane is braided with red ribbons. You feel a knot tighten in your stomach. You are used to the slaughter of animals for food, but this is different. This is a gift for the gods, and the atmosphere is thick with solemnity. Olaf himself delivers the blow with a consecrated axe. The moment is swift and surprisingly quiet. The blood is collected in a large ceremonial bowl. The Volva then takes a bundle of fur twigs, tips it into the bowl, and walks around the circle, sprinkling the blood on the altar, on the prows of the carved dragon heads brought from the new ships, and on the faces of the warriors who have pledged to sail. When she approaches you, her eyes, dark and knowing, seem to look right through you. The flick of the twig leaves a warm, sticky trail across your cheek. You are now marked, bound to this venture. The meat of the horse is then butchered and cooked over a great fire, to be shared in a communal feast. To refuse to eat would be a grave insult to the gods and the host. As you chew the tough, slightly sweet meat, you listen to the stories being told around the fire. They are tales of the gods' exploits, Thor fishing for the world spent, Loki's cunning tricks, Odin hanging himself from the world tree for 9 days and 9 nights in exchange for the knowledge of the runes. And the runes, they are everywhere, not just carved into the memorial stones at the edge of the woods, but on the handles of tools, on small amulets worn around people's necks, and even tattooed onto the skin of the most devout warriors. You've been taught the basics of the alphabet, the Elder Fuduk. You know how to carve your name. But to the experts, the Runemasteres and the Volva, these are not just letters. Each symbol has a name, a phonetical meaning. The rune for F, Fehu, means cattle, but also wealth and prosperity. The rune for you are ox, but also strength and untamed power. To carve a rune is to invoke its power. It's a system of writing, yes, but it's also a system of magic. A practical tool and a mystical key all at once. Some modern historians will argue the magical aspect is overblown, a romantic fantasy, while others will insist that for the people of this time, the line between writing and spellcasting was almost non-existent. Later in the evening, as the ale begins to flow freely, the Volva performs a CI drive, a ritual of divination. She sits on a high seat, and her attendants chant a strange, hypnotic song. Her body begins to tremble. Her eyes roll back in her head, and she begins to speak in a high, wavering voice, answering questions put to her by the chieftain about the coming voyage. She speaks in riddles, of a serpent tasting the blood of a saint and silver flowing like a river. Her predictions are vague, ominous, yet thrilling. You sit in the flickering firelight, the taste of horse meat in your mouth and the smear of blood drying on your skin, feeling utterly overwhelmed. This is the spiritual world you inhabit. It's not one of good versus evil, but of order versus chaos. The gods themselves are flawed, passionate, and often treacherous. They don't offer eternal salvation, but they do offer a model for how to live, and perhaps more importantly, how to die with courage, seeking a reputation that will outlive you. Your life is a thread in a great tapestry, woven by the Norns, the Fates. but the pattern is not entirely fixed. Your choices, your bravery, can affect the weave. The thought is both terrifying and liberating. As the feast winds down and you prepare to walk home through the dark woods, the Volva's prophecy echoes in your mind. A serpent tasting blood, silver flowing like a river. It no longer sounds like a child's story, it sounds like a destination. The prophecy hangs in the air for days, a mist of destiny that settles over your valley. The feast is over, the gods have been appeased, but the real-world consequences are just beginning. The ship, now fully equipped with its sail mast, and a formidable row of brightly painted shields clipped along its sides, is ready. It's a magnificent, terrifying sight. All it needs now is a crew. The decision is not entirely yours to make. Your family, as freeholders under Olaf's authority, owes him service. Your father is a skilled farmer and the head of your household. He is too valuable to the land to be risked on the sea. The lot falls, therefore, to the next available and able-bodied man in the family. That means you. One evening your father sits you down by the long fire. The rest of the family pretends to be busy at the far end of the longhouse, but a heavy silence tells you they are all listening. He doesn't command you to go. That's not his way. Instead, he speaks of honor, of duty to the chieftain, and of the family's reputation. A man who shrinks from a challenge brings shame not just on himself, but on his kin, he says, his eyes fixed on the flames. But a man who dies foolishly leaves his family weaker. He is leaving the choice to you, but it's a choice laden with the weight of generations. To refuse is to brand yourself an ENGR, a man without honor, a label that would stick to you and your family for years. It would make it hard to find a partner, to trade at markets, to be respected at the local thing. To accept is to trade the familiar ache of farm work for 100 unknown dangers. You spend the next day in a haze of indecision. You do your chores on autopilot, your mind a whirlwind. You walk down to the edge of the fjord and look at the ship. It seems to mock you with its sleek, predatory beauty. You see other young men from the neighboring farms, some swaggering with bravado, others looking as pale and worried as you feel. They are all facing the same choice. This is the core of the Viking war band. A concept that will terrorize Europe for the next 2 centuries. It wasn't a formal, state-sponsored army. It was a band of followers bound by an oath of loyalty to a specific leader. These were not just nameless soldiers, they were retainers, companions who fought alongside their chieftain, shared in the glory, and most importantly, shared in the loot. The relationship was personal. To join Olaf's crew was to become one of his men, to tie your fate directly to his. That night, you can't sleep. You keep thinking of the stories. The ones about mountains of silver, yes, but also the other ones. The ones whispered by old women about Dardarogastar, the walking dead who guard their treasure mounds, and the kraken, a beast so large it can pull a whole ship down to the depths. Your mythology is full of monsters, and the sea is where most of them live. You also think about the practicalities. What do you even bring on such a journey? You own one set of woolen clothes, a simple knife, and not much else. You have no helmet, no shield, no sword. Your father has a fine steel axe, but it's his most valuable tool, needed for the farm. You would be going with nothing but the strength in your arms and a desperate hope that Olaf would provide the necessary gear. This was a common reality. Not every man on a long ship was a helmeted, mail-clad warrior. Many were, just like you, farmer rowers who were expected to fight with whatever was at hand. The image of the Viking warrior is a composite, built from the graves of the wealthy elite, not the reality of the average crew member. The next morning you find your mother has been up all night. She has taken your best war tunic and has been reinforcing the seams. She has also packed a small leather pouch with a lump of hard cheese and a strip of dried meat. She doesn't say anything, but her actions speak for her. She is preparing you for a journey. Seeing this small act of love and resignation is what finally solidifies your decision. To refuse now would be to dishonor her preparation, to waste her sleepless night. You walk out of the longhouse and find your father sharpening his farm axe. You don't need to say the words. You can see it in your face. He nods slowly, a flicker of something pride, fear, regret in his eyes. He holds out the axe. "This has felled more trees than I can count," he says. May it serve you as well against different kinds of wood. The double meaning is clear. You take the axe. The worn wooden handle feels familiar and solid in your hand. It's not a sword, but it's a piece of your home, a piece of your father's strength. Later that day, you walk down to the shore where Olaf's right-hand man is taking names. You give him yours. He claps you on the shoulder, a wide toothy grin on his face. Welcome to the crew, he says. We sail on the next high tide. You are now a Viking. Or, to be more precise, you are a man about to foray Viking to go on a Viking. The term wasn't an identity, not yet. It was a job description. A temporary and very dangerous career choice. You walk back to the longhouse, the weight of the axe in your hand a heavy counterpoint to the lightness of terror in your chest. You have made your choice. The thread of your life is now pulling you away from the land and out onto the grey, open water. The call comes before dawn. A horn blast, long and deep, echoes across the fjord, a sound that seems to pull you from your sleep. There's no ceremony this time, no song goodbyes, just a frantic scramble in the smoky dimness of the longhouse. You pull on your tunic, grab the small pouch of food your mother prepared, and strap your father's axe to your belt. Your mother presses a small, carved wooden bird into your hand for luck. Your father just gives you a firm nod. You join a stream of other men and boys heading towards the shore. The tide is high, the black water of the fjord lapping gently against the hull of the longship. The dragon head on its prow seems to snarl at the pale pre-dawn sky. The gangplank has been laid, and you hurry aboard, trying to find a place that's out of the way. The ship is crowded. There are about 60 men, and the space is unbelievably cramped. A single mast stands in the center, currently lowered. Down the middle of the deck is a jumble of chests, barrels of water, and bundles of equipment. The only places to sit are the small wooden sea chests, one for each man that will serve as both storage and rowing benches. You find an empty one and quickly sit down, clutching your axe. You feel very young and very out of place. With a series of sharp commands, the crew casts off the mooring ropes. The ship drifts free. Then, the order is given to take up the oars. Long, heavy oars are thrust out through small, round ports in the side of the hull. You grab one. It's heavy and awkward. The man next to you, a burly, bearded fellow with a scar down his cheek, grunts at you. Keep rhythm. Watch the man in front. Don't be the one to mess it up. And then you begin to row. It's brutal work. The oar is a massive lever, and it feels like you're trying to pull the whole fjord behind you. The first few strokes are a clumsy disaster of clashing oars and shouted curses, but slowly, guided by the rhythm keeper at the front who pounds a steady beat on a small drum, you fall into a rhythm. Thump. Heave. Splash. The ship begins to move, gliding silently through the dark water. You look back and see the flickering torchlight of your longhouse getting smaller and smaller, until it's just another spark among the stars. As the sun rises, a favorable wind picks up. The order is given to raise the mast and sail. With a great, coordinated effort, the heavy mast is hauled upright and secured with ropes. The massive square sail, made of heavy wool dyed with red and white stripes, is unfurled. It cracks like thunder as it catches the wind, and the ship surges forward. The change is immediate. The strain on your rowing muscles vanishes, replaced by the hiss of water along the hull and the hull and the hum and the hull and the hull and the hum of the wind in the rigging. The ship feels alive now, a creature of the wind, flying across the water. This is your new home. There is no shelter, no cabin, no roof. You will eat, sleep, and we're completely exposed to the elements. If it rains, you will be wet. If the sun beats down, you will be burned. At night, you'll sleep in your spot on the sea chest, huddled in a leather sleeping bag if you're lucky, or just your wool cloak if you're not. And then there's the navigation. There is no compass. The chieftain Olaf and his navigator, a quiet, intense man, are constantly watching the world around them. During the day they watch the sun. At night they watch the stars, particularly the North Star. But what happens when it's cloudy? You hear whispers of a secret tool the solar Stein N, the sunstone. The legends say it's a magical crystal that can show you the position of the sun even on a completely overcast day. You see the navigator holding a small, milky-looking crystal up to the grey sky, turning it until it seems to catch a faint, internal glow. Is it magic or science? Centuries later, physicists will prove that certain types of crystal, like cordierite, found in Scandinavia, can indeed polarize light, making it possible to pinpoint the sun's location through thick cloud cover. For you, it is simply magic, and a deeply reassuring one at that. The first few days are a blur of sea's incus, aching muscles, and the constant, chilling spray of the North Sea. You learn to eat the food of the sailor hard, dry bread that seems to suck all the moisture from your mouth, unsalted, dried fish that is tough as leather. Water is strictly rationed. You learn the routines of the ship, the watches, the trimming of the sail, the bailing of the bilge water that seems to constantly seep in. You also learn about the crew. They are a rough mix. There are experienced sailors who seem as comfortable on the rolling deck as you are on solid ground. There are swaggering bullies who boast of past raids, and there are quiet farm boys like you. Their faces a mixture of bravado and terror. You learn to keep to yourself, to do your work, and to not draw attention. The sea is a constant presence, a character in your journey. One day it can be a flat, blue mirror, the next a churning chaos of grey, mountainous waves that crash over the side, drenching everyone and everything. You see whales, their dark backs arching out of the water, and pods of dolphins that race the ship's prow. It is terrifying, and it is beautiful. On the third day, the lookout shouts, "Land." A low, dark line has appeared on the horizon. It's not the steep, mountainous coast of your home. It's a flat, green smudge under a grey sky. As you get closer, you see it's a low-lying island with a long, sandy beach. There are no signs of welcome. No harbour, no town. Just a cluster of stone buildings on a small rise, one of them with a strange, round tower. It looks quiet, peaceful, unsuspecting. Olaf stands at the prow, his hand shielding his eyes. Hungry smile spreads across his face. Lower the sail, he commands. Take up the oars, and be quiet. The rhythmic thump of the drum starts again. A slow, predatory heartbeat. The serpent is approaching the shore. The silence on the ship is a heavy, breathing thing. The only sounds are the rhythmic splash of the oars, the creak of the oarlocks, and the low, tense murmur of orders from Olaf at the helm. He steers the ship towards a secluded cove, the shallow draft of the long ship allowing you to get much closer to the shore than a normal vessel could. The keel grates on the sand and pebbles a mere 20 feet from the dry beach. This is it. Out. Olaf barks. Go. There's no ramp. You simply swing your legs over the side of the ship and drop into the thigh-deep, shockingly cold water. The shock of it steals your breath. You grip your father's axe, its weight a strange comfort, and wade through the churning surf onto the wet sand. Around you, the other men are doing the same, their movements quick and surprisingly disciplined. Shields are unclipped from the rail, and the experienced warriors form a loose wall at the front, their swords and spears glinting in the pale morning light. Your destination is the cluster of stone buildings on the low hill. It's a monastery. You don't know the word, but you can tell it's a holy place. There's a quiet reverence about it, and a strange lack of defenses. It feels soft. As you and the war band begin to jog up the grassy slope, a figure appears at the door of the largest building. A GSM rests in a simple brown robe, his head shaved in a strange pattern. He sees your group, a horde of 60 armed men running towards him, and his face freezes in a mask of pure, uncomrephantide terror. He turns and tries to run, shouting a warning in a language you don't understand. There is no battle. It's not a fight. It's a slaughter. The few robed men who emerge are unarmed. They fall before the swords of Olaf's veterans before they can even mount a defense. You hang back, your stomach churning, your axe feeling heavy and useless in your hand. This isn't the glorious combat from the fireside tales. The inside of the main building, the church, is a strange and wondrous sight. The air smells sweet, like burning wax and something else, a perfumed smoke. The light is dim, filtering through a few high windows made not of scraped animal hide, but of colored glass that paints patterns on the stone floor. At the far end is a large wooden cross, covered in gold leaf that glitters in the torchlight. There are silver cups, plates adorned with jewels, and a large, heavy book whose cover is inlaid with polished gems and intricate gold work. To the monks of this place, Lindifsen, this is the house of God, filled with sacred relics. To you and your crewmates, it is a treasure chest left wide open. The men fall upon it with a feverish glee. They strip the gold from the cross with their knives, stuff the silver goblets into sacks, and rip the jeweled cover from the holy book, casting the pages aside as worthless. One man finds the communion wine, drinks deeply from the silver chalice, then spits it out, disgusted by the taste. You just stand there in the middle of the chaos, overwhelmed. You see a young monk, no older than yourself, huddled in a corner, clutching a wooden cross and praying in a frantic whisper. One of Olafest's men walks over, yanks the cross from his hands, sees its plain wood, and throws it aside in disgust. He grabs the boy by his robe, ready to drag him away with the other captives to be sold as thralls. You should do something. Help him. Grab some treasure for yourself. This is what you left home for, the silver, the riches. But seeing it like this, torn from this quiet, peaceful place, feels wrong. It feels like you are violating a grave. Later, historians will mark this day, the 8th of June, 793, as the unofficial start of the Viking Age. The raid on the holy island of Lindisfarne sent a shockwave of terror and disbelief throughout Christian Europe. A scholar in the court of Charlemagne would write, "Never before has such a terror appeared in Britain as we have now suffered from a pagan race. The heathens poured out the blood of saints around the altar, and trampled on the bodies of saints in the temple of God, like dung in the streets. For them it was an unprecedented act of sacrilege. For Olaf and his men, it was simply good business. They had no concept of sacrilege. A church, a monastery, these were just poorly defended buildings full of wealth. The Christian God was just another deity, and clearly not a very powerful one, if he couldn't protect his own house. The moral outrage was a complete surprise to them if they ever even heard of it. After a few hours it's over. The buildings are ransacked, some were set on fire, their thatched roofs sending plumes of black smoke into the sky. The remaining monks are herded together, their hands bound, destined for the slave markets in Dublin or even further south. The treasure, a staggering amount of it, is hauled back to the long ship in chests and sacks. You stumble back to the beach, your mind numb. You haven't struck a single blow. You haven't taken a single piece of silver. Your axe is clean. One of the veterans shoves you as he passes. "What's wrong with you, boy? Afraid to get your hands dirty?" He spits on the sand near your feet. You take up a spot on the ship. You earn your keep. You wade back to the long ship and haul yourself aboard, your clothes soaked and your spirit feeling just as cold and heavy. The ship is abuzz with triumphant energy. Men are comparing their loot, laughing and boasting. Olaf stands at the stern, his face flushed with victory, looking at the sacks of gold and silver with greedy satisfaction. The ship feels different now. It's no longer just a vessel, it's a predator, bloated and satisfied after its first kill. As the crew pushes off the beach and raises the sail, you look back at the smoking ruins of Lindifsen. The quiet shore is quiet once more, save for the crackle of flames and the mournful cry of the gulls. You have tasted the life of a Viking, and it tastes like salt and smoke, and shame. You wonder if this is what the Volva meant by a serpent tasting the blood of a saint. If so, the silver is indeed beginning to flow, but at a cost you hadn't begun to imagine. The mood on the ship during the journey away from Lindifsen is ecstatic. The hold is laden with more wealth than you have ever seen in your life. Men who once owned nothing but the clothes on their backs now run their hands through piles of silver coins, hold golden crucifixes up to the sun, and boast about the thralls they will sell. The grim tension of the outward voyage has been replaced by a boisterous, drunken confidence. Olaf is generous with the captured Dale, and the nights are filled with loud songs and exaggerated tales of the raid. You, however, remain quiet. The veteran's words still sting, and you feel like an outsider, the ghost at the feast. You did not participate in the violence or the plunder, and so you have no claim to a share of it. You are just a rower, a passenger on this voyage of brutality. After several days of sailing south along the coast of this Newland Angle land, they call it you approach a wide river mouth. Instead of heading back east towards home, Olive directs the ship up the river. The landscape is lush and green, dotted with small villages and churches. Panic follows your ship like a shadow. People on the riverbank stop and stare, then grab their children and run for the woods. Signal fires are lit on distant hills. Your crew makes a few more small-scale raids. A prosperous-looking farmstead here, a small, unguarded monastery there. But now you force yourself to participate. You jump into the cold water. You run up the beach with your axe in your hand. You don't kill anyone, you still can't bring yourself to do that, but you smash down a door. You grab a struggling pig. You help carry a chest of goods back to the ship. It's enough. The other men stop looking at you with contempt. You are now part of the machine. But then, something different happens. After a particularly successful raid on a small port town, a delegation of local elders approaches your camp under a flag of truce. They are terrified but determined. They do not offer battle. They offer a deal. Through a nervous merchant who knows a few words of your tongue, they offer you a payment to leave them in peace. Olaf, sitting on a log and casually sharpening his sword, listens to their proposal. They offer 100 pounds of silver. He laughs in their faces. But he doesn't attack them. He negotiates. The final price is 300 pounds of silver, to be delivered in 2 days. This, you realize, is a different kind of raid. It's extortion. It's a protection racket on a national scale. This is the infamous Dane Geld, the Dane Gold. It would become a crippling tax on the kingdoms of England and Francia for the next century. Rather than suffer the constant destruction of raids, many rulers and local lords found it cheaper and easier to simply pay the Vikings to go away. It was a pragmatic solution that had disastrous long-term consequences. It showed that violence was profitable, and it encouraged larger and larger fleets to return, demanding ever greater sums. Some historians argue that Dane Geld was a savvy political tool that bought time for defenses to be built, while others see it as a catastrophic policy of appeasement that only fueled the fire. For the next 2 days you wait. It's a strange, tense peace. You camp on the beach, and the locals watch you from a safe distance. Then carts arrive, laden with sacks. The silver is counted, weighed, and loaded onto the long ship. There is no bloodshed, no burning, no terror, just a simple, cold business transaction. Looking at the pile of silver, you realize it's more than what was taken from Lindisfarne, and no one had to die for it. This, you think, is a much smarter way to be a Viking. The sword is a tool, but the threat of the sword is a weapon all its own. This discovery changes the dynamic of the journey. Raiding is no longer just about surprise and plunder. It's a calculated business. Olaf becomes less a warlord and more a grim-faced entrepreneur. The goal isn't always to fight, but to be so terrifying that no one wants to fight you. You also discover another side to this life trade. In one of the towns you persuade to pay you, you wander into the marketplace. Even with your fearsome crewmates nearby, the lure of commerce is strong. Local merchants, seeing that you haven't burned their stalls down, cautiously try to barter. One of your crewmates, a man from the south of your homeland, trades a finely wrought silver brooch looted from a monastery for a cow's of good wine and a new cloak made of fine, soft wool, far superior to your own scratchy homespun. Another trades a handful of silver coins for a beautiful sword with a patterned blade, a Frankish design that is highly prized. You watch this with fascination. You have nothing of value to trade, except perhaps your father's axe, which you would never part with. But you see that these voyages aren't just about taking. They are also about exchanging. You see amber from the Baltic Sea being traded for English wool, and walrus ivory from the far north being exchanged for Frankish glass beads. This is the other engine of the Viking Age, the one that doesn't get featured as often in the epic poem. They were not just raiders, they were the greatest merchants and traders of their era, connecting a vast network that stretched from Canada to Constantinople. Some of the men on your ship are carrying small portable scales to weigh silver, a merchant stool. They were prepared for business, not just battle. The line between a part and a trader, you're learning, is a very thin one indeed. Sometimes it's just a matter of whether you unsheathe your sword before or after you state your price. The season is turning. The days are growing shorter. The wind has a sharper bite to it, and the grey sea looks colder and less welcoming than before. The veterans on the crew start talking amongst themselves, casting anxious glances at the sky. They know the signs. The autumn storms are coming, and the North Sea in a storm is no place for a long ship, no matter how well built. The logical thing to do would be to point the dragon prow east and make the perilous journey home, your sea chests heavy with silver and your heads full of stories. But Olaf has other ideas. Your ship is not the only one plying these coasts. You meet two other long ships in the mouth of a wide estuary, their crews as hungry and ambitious as your own. Their chieftains parley with Olaf, and a new, audacious plan is formed. Why go home? The journey is dangerous, and what's home? The silver will be spent, and you will be a farmer again by spring. The decision is made to overwinter in this new land. It's a radical idea. Viking raids had, until this point, been seasonal affairs, summer smash-and-grab operations. The idea of a foreign army establishing a permanent camp on English soil is a new and terrifying development for the locals. The combined fleet, a small armada of 3 ships and nearly 200 men, sails up a river until they find a small, defensible island near the bank. This will be their winter base. The long ships are dragged ashore and placed under protective coverings of sod and timber. A defensive ditch is dug around the perimeter of the camp, and a rough wooden palisade is erected. It's not a town, but it's more than just a temporary camp. Life in the winter camp is a strange mix of boredom and anxiety. The exhilarating danger of the raid is gone, replaced by the mundane reality of survival. Your days are spent chopping wood, reinforcing the defenses and standing watch. The weather is miserable. It rains constantly, a cold, persistent drizzle that seeps into everything, turning the camp into a sea of mud. Your wool clothes are perpetually damp, and you can never seem to get warm even huddled around the roaring fires. Food becomes the central obsession. The grain and salted meat you brought with you are long gone. You must live off the land. Hunting parties are sent out, returning with deer and wild boar. Fishing provides a steady, if bland, supply of food, but the main source of sustenance is foraging or, more accurately, raiding the local food stores. Small parties of warriors are sent out to request grain, cattle, and ale from the surrounding villages. These are not the large-scale, terrifying raids of the summer. They are grim, necessary expeditions to keep 200 hungry men from starving. You find you are surprisingly good at this. Your farm boy skills, once a source of quiet shame amongst the seasoned warriors, are now in demand. You can track animals. You know how to find edible roots and mushrooms. You know how to butcher a pig efficiently. The same veteran who once mocked you for your clean axe now asks for your help in setting snares for rabbits. Your status in the camp slowly begins to rise, but the boredom is a corrosive force. There is nothing to do but wait for the winter to end. The men gamble, they drink heavily, they quarrel over trivial things. Fights break out, sometimes ending with a drawn knife and a new grave to be dug in the frozen earth. To combat the oppressive idleness, the older men tell stories. Around the fire at night, you hear the great sagas, the epic tales of heroes like Sigurd the Dragonliar and Dragnarlyr and Dragnarlothbrok. These stories are more than just entertainment, they are a history, a moral compass, and a training manual, all in one. They teach you what it means to be a good man, a brave warrior, and a respected leader. You also learn a lot about the weird superstitions of your people. For instance, you learn it's considered incredibly bad luck to rock a cradle with a child in it. Why? Because it's believed to give the baby a rocking dizziness in its head for life. Another strange belief is that if a man's hair is used by a bird to build a nest, he will suffer from headaches until the nest is destroyed. Whether anyone truly believed this, or if it was just something to say, is impossible to know. Historians will forever be stumped by the line between genuine folk belief and simple tradition. For you, It's just another piece of the strange tapestry of your culture, something to talk about during the long, dark, boring nights. As the winter deepens, the mood grows darker. The local Saxon lords have not been idle. They see your camp not as a temporary nuisance, but as an invasion. Small skirmishes break out. A foraging party is ambushed, and only half the men return. The fear of a large-scale attack is constant. You sleep with your axe by your side, and every strange noise in the night brings you instantly awake. This is the harsh reality behind the glamour of the raid. It's not all glory and silver. It's months of cold, damp, and boredom punctuated by moments of terror. It's the constant threat of starvation and disease. Sickness sweeps through the camp, a hacking cough that leaves men weak and feverish. There are no healers, no medicine beyond a few herbal remedies of dubious effect. More men die from sickness than from Saxon sword. You find yourself thinking of home, of the smoky warmth of the longhouse, the taste of your mother's porridge which you would now give a sack of silver for, the solid, predictable rhythm of the farming seasons. You left that life seeking freedom and wealth. You found a different kind of prison, a muddy, cold island in a hostile land, surrounded by enemies, waiting for a sun that never seems to rise. When the first hesitant signs of spring finally arrive, melting the frost and turning the muddy camp into an even swampier morass, the relief is so profound it's almost a physical thing. The chieftains decide not to linger. The local Saxons are growing bolder, their militias better organized. It's time to move on. But instead of heading home, the small fleet points its dragon pirogues south and then west, towards the Irish Sea. The whispers on the winter wind were not just of England, but of another island, Hibernia, and a town there founded by Norsemen, a place bustling with trade and opportunity. A place called Dwyerfellen. Sailing into the mouth of the River Liffey is a different experience from your arrival at Lindefsen. Here there is no silent, unsuspecting shore. The river is crowded with ships of all shapes and sizes. There are sleek long ships like your own, but also broad, tubby cargo ships called KNRs, and small, hide-covered fishing boats. And on a ridge overlooking a dark pool in the river the Dublin from which the city gets its name is the settlement itself. It's the biggest town you have ever seen. Not a mere collection of farms like your home, nor a makeshift camp like your winter base, but a true thriving port. A high wooden wall or palisade surrounds the settlement. Inside, you can see the steep pitched roofs of dozens of buildings, packed tightly together. The waterfront is a chaotic hive of activity. Men are unloading barrels from a fat merchant ship. A blacksmith's hammer rings out from a nearby shed, and the air is thick with the smells of salt fish, tar, livestock, and the unfamiliar, enticing aroma of spices. Your ships are greeted not with alarm, but with a cautious welcome. This is a Viking town, founded a generation ago by men just like you. While they are wary of new arrivals, they also recognize the value of new blood and fresh silver. Olaf negotiates with the local Norse Jarl, and your crew is allowed to make camp outside the walls, and more importantly, to enter the city to trade. Walking through the gates of Dublin is like stepping into another world. The streets are narrow, paved, and filthy, a crowded maze of timber-framed houses. The buildings are built in the familiar Scandinavian style, long and rectangular, but they are crammed together, gable end to the street. You have to constantly watch your step to avoid stepping in something unpleasant, as pigs and chickens roam freely, acting as the city's primary sanitation department. The energy is intoxicating. The place is a riot of different cultures. You see your own fair-haired, bearded Norsemen, but also red-haired Irish locals, swarthy Frankish merchants, and even a few exotic-looking traders from the distant south, with darker skin and clothes of a style you've never seen. You hear a dozen languages spoken in the marketplace, a boisterous, chaotic symphony of commerce, and the goods for sale it's staggering. There are stalls selling beautiful Irish metalwork, intricate brooches and pins that make your people's carvings look crude. There are merchants selling wine from Francia, pottery from the Rhineland, and glass beads of every imaginable color. But the most valuable commodity, you quickly learn, is people. Dublin is one of the largest slave markets in Western Europe. You see the captives taken from your raids, the English villagers, the monks from Lindisfarne being sold alongside Irish captives taken in local wars. They stand on wooden blocks, their eyes empty and hollow, as potential buyers inspect them like livestock. You see the young monk from the church, his face gaunt, being sold to an Irish chieftain for a handful of silver. A knot of guilt and shame tightens in your gut, and you turn away, unable to watch. You see evidence of a strange cultural fusion everywhere. The Norse settlers have adopted some local Irish customs, and the Irish have adopted some of theirs. You see Viking warriors wearing brightly colored Irish cloaks, fastened with classic Scandinavian brooches. You hear children playing in the street, shouting in a pidgin language that mixes Norse and Gaelic words. The line between conqueror and colonist, between raider and resident, is incredibly blurry here. Historians will call this the Hiberno-Norse culture, a unique and vibrant fusion that would dominate Irish coastal towns for centuries. It's a classic example of how Vikings were not just destroyers, but also builders of cities and creators of new, hybrid societies. You find a store run by an Old Norse craftsman who specializes in making things from bone and antler. The level of artistry is incredible. He has combs with intricate animal carvings, tiny, delicate needles for sewing, and even a set of gaming pieces for HNEF@AFL, the popular Viking board game. He shows you one of his prized creations, a flute carved from the leg bone of a swan. He explains that swan bone is the best because it is hollow and strong, and produces the clearest, most beautiful sound. This small, odd fact, the best bone for a flute, sticks with you. It's a glimpse into a world of specialized craft and knowledge you never knew existed. You spend your small share of the Danegeld, the protection money you help turn on a few practical items, a new pair of sturdy leather shoes, a whetstone for your axe, and a small silver coin that you keep tied in a pouch around your neck. It's the first real wealth you have ever possessed. As dusk falls, the city-est ovens fill up. You sit in a smoky, crowded hall, sipping a strange, sweet honey wine called mead, listening to a bard sing an Irish epic poem, accompanied by a small harp. The melody is hauntingly beautiful, completely different from the harsh, chanting sagas of your homeland. You look around at the mix of faces in the firelight, Norse, Irish, Frankish, all drinking, trading, and living together in this chaotic, violent, and vibrant city. You came here as a raider, a Viking, all. But looking around, you realize there are other ways to live in this new world. You could be a trader, a craftsman, a settler. For the first time, the idea of not going home doesn't feel like a punishment. It feels like a possibility. Your time in Dublin stretches from days into weeks. Olaf, ever the opportunist, has found a new venture. He's been hired by the Norse Jar of Dublin as a mercenary to help in his constant squabbles with a neighboring Irish king. It's a profitable arrangement that means your crew now has a semi-permanent base and a steady income of silver. The life of a raider, it seems, can sometimes settle into the more predictable, if still dangerous, routine of a soldier for hire. This relative stability gives you a chance to see more of how this strange new society works. One day, word spreads through the settlement that a thing is being convened. You've heard of these gatherings back home, but have never attended one of major significance. This one, you're told, is important. A dispute has arisen between two powerful families over a stolen herd of cattle, and it has already resulted in one man's death. It could erupt into a full-blown blood feud that would tear the small community apart. The thing is held in a large, open field a short walk from the city walls. There is no building, no grand hall. Like the religious sites of your people, your legal chambers are the open air. At the center of the field is a small, man-made hillock, the Lorach, where the leaders of the assembly will stand. Hundreds of people have gathered, not just the grim-faced warriors of the two feuding families, but merchants, craftsmen, farmers, and their families. It seems the entire community is present. This is not a private legal proceeding, it's a public spectacle. You learn that all free men have the right to attend, to speak, and to shout their vote by clashing their weapons against their shields. It's a noisy, chaotic, and surprisingly democratic process. The assembly is presided over by the Jarl, but he doesn't act as a judge. His role is to keep order. The real legal authority rests with the law speaker. This is an old, respected man who is famed in battle but for his memory. It is his duty to memorize the entirety of the law code, a complex web of traditions, precedents, and rules, and recite the relevant passages from memory at each thing. Written laws are a rarity. The law lives in the mind of this one man. The proceedings begin. The plaintiff, the head of the family whose cattle were stolen, stands before the law and makes his accusation. He is a gifted speaker, his voice ringing with passion and outrage. He lays out his case, calling witnesses to testify. Then the defendant, a stony-faced man with a reputation for trouble, gives his side of the story. He claims the cattle had wandered onto his land and he was merely keeping them safe. It's a flimsy excuse, and the crowd murmurs its disapproval. What fascinates you is the legal process itself. It's not about following the correct procedure. Both are incredibly important. Both men have to swear sacred oaths on a heavy silver arm ring, consecrated to the gods. To swear a false oath is the most heinous of crimes, one that will bring the wrath of the gods down not just on you, but on your entire family. The case seems to hinge on who can bring more oath helpers, reputable men willing to swear that their man is telling the truth. It's a system based not on evidence, but on reputation and social standing. The debate is fierce. The law speaker recites the section of the law pertaining to theft and manslaughter. The penalty is complex. It's not imprisonment or execution. It's a fine, a WER guild or man price. Every person, from the highest jarl to the lowliest free farmer, has a specific monetary value attached to them. If you kill someone, you must pay their WER guild to their family to prevent a blood feud. The price for the man killed in the initial dispute is enough to buy a large farm and all its livestock. The families argue over the amount. The plaintiff demands the full price. The defendant argues for a lesser sum, claiming the killing was not intentional. Finally, a panel of arbitrators, respected elders from neutral families, proposes a compromise. The defendant will pay 2/3 of the WER guild for the killing, and return twice the number of cattle that were stolen. Now comes the crucial moment. The jarl calls for a vote. Do you accept this judgment? He shouts. The plaintiff's family and their supporters shout their assent and bang their spears on their shields. The defendant's side is more reluctant, but seeing they are outnumbered and the crowd is against them, they too eventually add to the dean. The judgment is passed. The dispute is settled. A blood feud has been averted, and the community can return to a fragile peace. You walk away from the thing with your head spinning. You have just witnessed a legal system that operates without prisons, without police, and without a king to enforce the law. It's a system based on community pressure, personal honor, and the ever-present threat of escalating violence. Justice is not something handed down from on high, it is a negotiation, a performance, a communal agreement to keep the peace. Whether this system was truly as democratic as it appeared, or if it was simply a way for the powerful to enforce their will, is a question historians still grapple with. It was certainly messy and favored the rich and well-connected, but it worked. It provided a framework for resolving disputes in a violent and unpredictable world. You also hear a strange legal tidbit discussed by two merchants near you. They are talking about divorce. One of them complains about his lazy wife, and the other tells him the legal grounds for separation. He learns that a man could divorce his wife for a number of reasons, but, astonishingly, a woman could also divorce her husband if he struck her in front of witnesses, for example, or if he was a poor provider. She could even divorce him, apparently, if he wore shirts that were cut too low, exposing his chest like a woman. The idea that a woman could divorce her husband for his fashion choices is so bizarre, so utterly alien to anything you've ever heard, that you can't but chuckle. It's a small, absurd detail, but it speaks to a world with a legal and social complexity you are only just beginning to comprehend. Your mercenary work for the Jarl of Dublin is profitable, but it's also dangerous. After a nasty skirmish with an Irish raiding party, the axe your father gave you was badly damaged, its edge chipped and the handle split. It's a devastating blow. The axe is not just a tool and a weapon, it's your last tangible link to home. Desperate, you seek out a smith to repair it. You are directed to a small, smoky hut on the edge of the city, distinguished by the constant, rhythmic clang of a hammer on steel and the acrid smell of burning coal. You push aside the heavy leather flap that serves as a door and step into a world of shadow and fire. The heat is intense. A large forge glows white-hot in the corner, and the smith, a mountain of a man with arms as thick as tree trunks and a beard singed grey from the heat, is pounding on a piece of glowing metal. His eyes, accustomed to the gloom, and grunts a greeting without pausing his work. You wait patiently, mesmerized by the process. You watch as he takes the shapeless lump of orange-hot iron, and with a dancer's precision and a brute strength, he hammers it into the shape of a spearhead. He seems to be not just forcing the metal into a new form, but communicating with it, coaxing it into its true purpose. When he is finished, he quenches the spearhead in a trough of water, which erupts in a furious hiss of steam. He inspects his work, then finally turns his full attention to you. You show him your broken axe. He takes it, his massive hand surprisingly gentle as he examines the damage. He turns it over and over, his expression unreadable. The handle is firewood, he says, his voice a low rumble. But the head, the steel is good. Honest steel. I can fix this. Over the next few days, you spend hours in the smithy watching him work. The smith is not a talkative man, but he seems to appreciate your quiet interest. In between the deafening bouts of hammering, he begins to explain his craft. He tells you that not all iron is the same. Most of the local stuff is soft and brittle. The best steel, he says, comes from the Rhineland, imported by Frankish raiders. It arrives in bars of high-quality metal, but he forges into the finest weapon. One afternoon another customer arrives. He is a high-ranking warrior, one of the Jarl's personal guard, and he has come not for a repair but to check on a new sword he has commissioned. The smith unlocks a heavy wooden chest and carefully lifts out a blade. Even unfinished, without a hilt or pommel, it is the most beautiful and terrifying thing you have ever seen. The smith sees the awe in your eyes. An Ulf-Brht, he says, the name spoken with a deep reverence. You have heard whispers of these swords. They are legends spoken of in the same breath as magical artifacts. They are said to be impossibly sharp, unnaturally strong, and so flexible they can be bent in a circle without breaking. They are the ultimate status symbol for a Viking warrior, worth a fortune. The smith explains what makes it so special. He describes a process that sounds like alchemy. He takes multiple rods of iron, some soft, some hard, and twists them together, heating and hammering them over and over. This is pattern welding. When the blade is finished and polished, it will have a stunning, watery or serpentine pattern on its surface, a visual testament to its complex construction. This process creates a blade with a soft, flexible core that can absorb shock, and a hard, razor-sharp edge that won't dull easily. But the real secret, he says, is the steel itself. The Ulf-Brht swords are made from something called crucible steel. It's an incredibly pure, high-carbon steel that is far stronger than anything else available in Europe at the time. The strange thing is, no one in Europe knows how to make it. The technique has been lost, or rather, it hasn't been invented there yet. He tells you the ingots of this miracle steel are traded down the great rivers from the east, from the lands of the Rus, and that they originate even further away, in the distant lands of Persia or India. That this legendary Viking sword is actually made from Middle Eastern or South Asian steel is a mind-boggling revelation. It speaks to a global trade network more complex than you could ever imagine. Of course, the authenticity of these swords is a hot topic. The smith complains that for every true Ulf-Brht, there are a dozen fakes. Less scrupulous smiths will forge a normal steel blade and then crudely engrave the VLFBL FBRHT inscription onto it to sell to unsuspecting warriors. The difference, he says, becomes tragically clear in the first real battle. Archaeologists centuries later will confirm everything the smith has told you. They will find roughly 170 of these swords. Chemical analysis will prove that the true Ulf-Brht blades are made of a crucible steel with a purity that wouldn't be seen again in Europe for another 800 years, and that its likely origin is the trade routes leading from the Middle East. They will also find the numerous counterfeits, which have a much lower quality steel. The debate about who or what Ulfbjer HT was a single, legendary smith, a workshop, a trademark will rage on, one of the great unsolved mysteries of the Viking Age. A few days later, your axe is ready. The smith has forged a new, stronger haft from a piece of ash wood, fitting the head to it perfectly. He hands it to you, and you feel its perfect balance. It feels more dangerous, more purposeful than it did before. It is no longer just a farmer's tool. It is a warrior's weapon. You pay the smith the agreed upon price in silver, and add an extra coin as a mark of respect for his artistry. You leave the smithy, the restored axe in your hand, feeling a renewed sense of confidence. You have seen firsthand the fusion of art science, and a touch of magic that goes into the tools of your violent trade. And you have learned that the heart of a Viking sword might just beat with steel forged under a distant, southern sun. Life in Dublin, with its cycle of mercenary work and urban living, becomes a new kind of normal. But the thief fever that first drove you from your farm never truly leaves the blood of men like Olaf. After a particularly profitable year, the old restlessness returns. Stories have been circulating in the taverns and docks, tales brought by sailors who have ventured far out into the Atlantic. They don't speak of lands to the south, full of treasure and soft targets, but of a strange, empty land to the northwest, an island of fire and ice. The story is told of a man named Ned Dodd who was blown off course on his way to the Faroe Islands and stumbled upon a vast, uninhabited land. Later, another voyager, a Swede named Garda R, circumnavigated it and named it Garda RS home. But the most compelling tale is of a Norwegian named Defloki Vilge Orason. Amen they call H or AFNAF Loki, or Raven F Loki. It's a fantastic story, a perfect blend of practical seamshan and mythic symbolism. Whether F Loki truly used this raven navigation method is debated by historians. It's a story that feels almost too good to be true, echoing older tales like that of Noah. But it's the story everyone tells, and it adds a layer of legend to this new land. FLOK's experience there, however, was not a happy one. He and his men landed in a beautiful fjord, lush and green, teeming with fish. They spent the entire summer fishing and hunting, so engrossed in the bounty of the place that they completely neglected to harvest hay for their livestock. The winter that followed was brutal, far harsher than they expected. All their animals starved to death. In the spring, disheartened, Eflunki climbed a mountain to survey the land. He looked down upon a neighboring fjord and saw that it was still choked with sea ice. All a failure, but by the potential. An entire massive island, completely uninhabited. No armies to fight, no kings to pay off. Just land, endless, free, and from the crowded, competitive fjords of Norway, the idea is intoxicating. He decides that this will be his next venture, not a raid for silver, but a voyage of settlement. He puts out the call. Who will join him on this journey to claim a piece of Iceland? The reaction is mixed. Many of the men are comfortable in Dublin. They have wives, or at least local girlfriends, under steady, if dangerous, income. They have no desire to trade that for a frozen rock in the middle of nowhere. But for others the story resonates. For men like you, who are still fundamentally landless farmers at heart, the promise of your own farm, your own homestead, is a powerful law. It's the dream that your society is built on. You decide to go. The life of a mercenary is wearing on you. You've seen too much, and the constant, low-level violence is grinding down your soul. The idea of building something, of owning a piece of the world that is truly yours, feels like a purer, more honest ambition. Preparations are made, but they are different from the preparations for a raid. You aren't sharpening swords or gathering supplies. You buy a few sheep and a goat, precious breeding stock for a new life. You acquire sacks of seed grain, tools for building and farming, and all the mundane necessities of starting from scratch. Your ship is no longer a sleek predator. It's a cramped, noisy, and very smelly nose-art. The journey northwest is long and difficult. The weather is unpredictable, and you spend weeks out of sight of land, navigating by the sun and stars, just as F. Loki did. You don't have any ravens, but you have the stories, and a growing sense of nervous anticipation. You are not sailing towards an empty map, to a place where you can finally build a home. One day, the lookout spots a strange sight on the horizon, a massive plume of white cloud rising from the sea itself. As you get closer, you see it's a column of steam, and you can smell sulfur on the wind. It's an underwater volcanic eruption, a reminder that this new land is still being forged, a place of primal, elemental power. It's both terrifying and daily inspiring. Finally, you see it, a dark line of coast under a vast, empty sky. Iceland. It doesn't look like the green paradise Loki first found, nor the frozen wasteland he named it for. It just looks empty, vast, treeless, and strangely beautiful in its darkness. As the ship finds a safe anchorage in a wide calm bay, you stand at the rail, looking out at your new home. There are no people, no buildings, no welcome, no threat. Just the wind, the sea, and the land. And for the first time since you left your fjord in Norway, you feel a sense of profound, hopeful peace. The path of the raven has led you here, to the edge of the known world, to begin again. Stepping ashore in Iceland is like stepping onto a newly created world. The air is so clean and sharp it almost hurts to breathe, and the silence is a physical presence broken only by the cries of seabirds and the whisper of the wind over volcanic rock. The sheer emptiness of the place is staggering. After the crowded, filthy streets of Dublin and the tense, populated coasts of England, this vast, silent landscape feels like a kind of freedom you've never known. Olaf, in his typical fashion, takes charge. According to the traditions of settlement, the leader of the expedition has the right to the first and largest claim of land. The process for this, you learn, is both practical and steeped in ritual. To claim his territory, Olaf performs all and takes ceremony. He lights a fire, a sacred act signifying the establishment of a new household. Then, he walks the perimeter of the land he wishes to claim, carrying a flaming torch. The area he can encircle between sunrise and sunset becomes his property. It's a huge swath of land along the coast encompassing the bay where you landed and stretching deep into a wide green valley. Now it's the turn of the rest of the crew, the settlers. Each free man can claim as much land as he can fence in. A mad scramble begins, a peaceful but intensely competitive rush to stake out the best plots. You find a promising spot a few miles from Olaf's main steading, a piece of land with a small stream running through it, some decent-looking pasture, and a sheltering bluff that will offer some protection from the fierce Arctic winds. For the first time in your life, you are a landowner. The feeling is dizzying. The first task is building a home. A huge, glaring problem that you noticed from the ship but didn't fully appreciate until now. There are almost no trees. The landscape is covered in low scrub, grass, and moss, but the tall, straight timbers needed for a traditional longhouse are nowhere to be found. The only wood available is the occasional piece of driftwood washed up on the shore, or the lone gnarled birch trees that grow in sparse groves inland. This is the great paradox of Icelandic settlement. The Vikings arrived in what was, for a northern climate, a surprisingly lush and partially forested land. But centuries of volcanic activity and a fragile ecosystem meant the woodlands were quickly depleted. Archaeologists and climate scientists still debate the speed and extent of this deforestation, but the effect was profound. It forced the settlers to develop a completely new style of architecture. Your new home will not be a proud, all-timber longhouse like the one you grew up in. It will be a turf house. You learn the technique from the more experienced settlers. First, you build a simple, low frame out of the precious wood you have, some salvaged from the ship, some from the sparse local groves. Then the real work begins. You cut large bricks of turf from the pastureland. This isn't just dirt, it's a thick mat of soil and grass roots, a natural building material. You stack these turf bricks around the wooden frame, creating walls that are several feet thick. The roof is laid with a few wooden rafters, then covered with smaller pieces of turf, grass side up. It's slow, back-breaking work, but as the structure takes shape, you see the genius of it. The thick turf walls provide incredible insulation against the brutal cold of the Icelandic winter. Your house is literally part of the landscape, growing out of the earth itself. From a distance, it will look like just another small green hill. It's a house that hunkers down, bracing itself against the elements rather than trying to dominate them. Life settles into a new rhythm. dictated by the urgent need to prepare for the coming winter. You build fences for your small flock of sheep. You plant a small patch of barley, praying it will have time to ripen in the short summer, and you spend days fishing in the fjord, smoking and drying your catch. The community is scattered, with each farmstead miles from the next, but you are all bound by a common purpose. You help your neighbors raise the frame of their house. They help you round up a stray sheep. One of the most remarkable things about this new society is its government. There is no king, no jarl. Olaf is your leader, the man you followed here, but he has no formal authority over you on your own land. Iceland is founded as a commonwealth, a republic of free farmers. Power is decentralized, held by about 36 local chieftains called Gor. A chieftain's power doesn't come from noble birth, but from the farmers who choose to align with him. If a farmer is unhappy with his chieftain, he is, in theory, free to declare his allegiance to another. The ultimate authority is the Althing, a national assembly that meets for 2 weeks every summer in a dramatic, stunning location, a rift valley where the earth itself has been torn apart by tectonic forces. Here, all the chieftains and any free farmer who wishes to attend gather to make laws, settle major disputes, and socialize. It is the oldest surviving parliament in the world. You hear talk of it all through your first winter, and you resolve to go when summer returns. You learn some quirky things about this new life. For instance, with wood being so scarce, the primary fuel source is dried animal dung. It burns surprisingly well with a slow, smoldering heat and a distinctive, earthy smell that will forever be associated in your mind with home. Another strange discovery is the use of geothermal heat. In some valleys, natural hot springs bubble up from the ground. Settlers in these areas build their houses and dairies nearby, using the steam and hot water for washing, cooking, and even a form of central heating. It's an ingenious adaptation to a unique environment. You are no longer a raider, a sailor, or a mercenary. You are a pioneer, a homesteader. You Arl and Nams Marl and take man. Your hands are calloused not from an oar or an axe handle, but from laying turf and digging ditches. You go to sleep at night not with the fear of battle, but with the simple, honest exhaustion of a day's hard labor. You look out from the door of your no turf-covered hoe, across your own fields, to the fjord where your own boat is moored. You have a stake in the world. This wild, empty, and beautiful land is now yours. Several years pass in Iceland. Your farm is established, your flock of sheep has grown, and you have become a respected member of your small, scattered community. Life is hard, dictated by the relentless cycle of short, intense summers and long, dark winters. But it is your life. You have a wife now, the daughter of a neighboring homesteader, and a young son who is fascinated by the stories you tell of the world beyond your fjord. You think perhaps that your days of long sea voyages are over, but the spirit of exploration that drove your people, he has not been extinguished, it has merely been dormant. A new story begins to circulate, passed from farm to farm during the long winter nights. It's the story of a man named Derek, a man with a fiery temper and even fiery red hair. Derek's story is one of trouble. He was exiled from Norway for manslaughter. He came to Iceland, settled down, but his temper got the better of him again. After a dispute with a neighbor over some borrowed benches escalated into another killing, he was outlawed by the Althing for 3 years. He was banished, a man with nowhere to go. But Eric had heard older, fainter tales. Rumors of a vast landmass even further west, sighted a generation ago by a sailor named Gunnbjorn who was blown off course. With nothing to lose, Eric gathered a ship and a crew of loyal followers and set out to find these Gunnbjorn skerries. For 3 years, the term of his exile, he explored. He sailed along an immense, forbidding coastline, charting its fjords and glaciers. He found sheltered valleys, surprisingly green and suitable for farming, nestled between colossal sheets of ice. When his exile was over, Eric returned to Iceland with a plan. A marketing plan. He knew that a land of ice and glaciers was not a great sales pitch to convince people to uproot their lives and follow him into the unknown. So he gave his discovery a new, much more appealing name. The name is a masterpiece of branding, and one of history's most famous examples of deceptive advertising. Was it an outright lie? The historical and archaeological evidence is complex. The parts of Greenland where the Norse settled were, during a period known as the medieval warm period, genuinely greener and more habitable than they are today. But the name was certainly an exaggeration, designed to paint a picture of a lush paradise rather than a marginal, subarctic environment. The debate continues: was Eric a cynical con man, or a visionary leader putting a positive spin on a risky but viable opportunity? You hear Eric himself speak at the Owl Thing. He is a charismatic and powerful speaker. He paints a picture of Greenland as a land of endless opportunity. He speaks of fjords teeming with fish, pastures for countless sheep and cattle, and mountains full of walruses and seals, whose ivory and hides are worth a fortune. In Iceland, he argues, all the good land is taken. We came here seeking freedom, but now our sons have no land to inherit. In Greenland, a man can be a king on his own farm. His words are seductive. You look at your own small farm. It's productive, but you know your son will have to divide it with any brothers he may have, or leave to seek his own fortune. The promise of more land, of a new frontier, is a powerful pull. The community is divided. Some scoff, calling Eric a fool and a charlatan, chasing ghosts in a land of ice. But others, particularly the younger generation and those who arrived in Iceland late and got the poorer land, are listening intently. The decision tears your family apart. Your wife is staunchly against it. She was born in Iceland. This is the only home she has ever known. She points to the hardships you've already endured and asks why you would throw it all away to chase the words of a convicted killer. But you feel the old stirring again, the call of the horizon, the desire to see what's over the next hill, or in this case, the next ocean. Ultimately, a compromise is reached, though it feels like a defeat for everyone. You will not go, not yet, but you will invest. You help fund a ship for your wife's younger brother, an ambitious and restless young man who is completely captivated by Eric's vision. You give him several of your best sheep and a share of your tools, in exchange for a claim on any land he stakes in the new colony. You watch from the shore as the great fleet prepares to leave. It's a massive undertaking. 25 ships, filled with men, women, children, and a cacophony of livestock, gather in the western fjords, ready to follow Eric the Red into the unknown. You help your brother-in-law load his meager possessions onto his ship. He is ecstatic, his eyes shining with the promise of adventure and wealth. You feel a pang of jealousy mixed with profound dread. You shake his hand and wish him luck, and watch as his ship hoists its sail and joins the fleet, a floating village of hopeful souls heading west. The journey, you hear later, was a disaster. The fleet was hit by a brutal storm in the treacherous waters between Iceland and Greenland. Of the 25 ships that set out, only 14 made it. The rest were either turned back or simply vanished, lost to the unforgiving sea. Your brother-in-law's ship, you learn many months later, was one of the ones that made it. You stay in Iceland, working your farm, raising your son, and feeling like you are living in a quieter, smaller world. You listen for news from the west, for letters and traders' reports from the Greenland colony. You go sent a piece of your family, a piece of your fortune, chasing a clever name across a cold sea. You wonder if you made the right choice, to stay in the world you know, or if you missed the chance to be part of the next great chapter of your people's story. A place you have never seen now occupies a huge space in your mind, a symbol of both limitless opportunity and catastrophic risk. Years go by. The news from the Greenland colony is sparse and mixed. They are surviving, but not thriving. The stories that drift back are of hardship, of struggles with the harsh climate and conflicts with the native peoples of the north, the Skrælings, as the Norse call them. Your investment in your brother-in-law's venture feels more and more like a loss. Your life in Iceland, once the frontier, now feels like the center of the world, a safe and predictable haven. But the world is bigger than just the North Atlantic. One summer, a visitor arrives at your farm. He is a distant cousin from your old home in Norway. A man you haven't seen since you were a boy. But he hasn't come from Norway. He has come from the east. He is a Russ, one of the many Scandinavians who have turned their ambitions not west towards empty lands, but south and east, towards the rich, ancient civilizations connected by the great river systems of what will one day be Russia and Ukraine. His name is Garda R, and he is a different kind of man from the farmers and raiders you know. He is a merchant adventurer, his skin weathered by sun and wind, his clothes a strange mix of Scandinavian wool and foreign silk. He doesn't speak of fjords and pastures, but of rivers so wide you can barely see the other side, of dense end of cities, whose wealth makes Dublin look like a poor village. Over the fire in your turf house, he tells his story. He speaks of loading his long ship not with warriors, but with goods honey, wax, furs from the northern forests, and amber from the Baltic shores. He and his crew then sailed not on the open sea, but up the rivers of the east, the Devi and the Dnieper. The journey, he explains, was not a simple matter of sailing. The rivers were interrupted by treacherous rapids and, in some places, vast stretches of land separating one river system from another. Here, he describes a process that leaves you speechless. They would have to haul their entire long ship out of the water and drag it overland for miles. This was the portage. He describes the back-breaking work of felling trees to use as rollers, laying them in a line through the forest, and then with ropes and sheer muscle power dragging the massive ship over them. It could take weeks. They were vulnerable to attack from local Slavic tribes, and the labor was so intense it could break a man's spirit. But it was the only way to get from the Baltic to the Black Sea, the only way to reach the rich markets of the south. He tells you of the cities they passed, wooden forts that were growing into powerful trading hubs: Holmgard, Novgorod, and Ugard Kyiv. These cities were ruled by Norse chieftains, the Rus, who had established themselves as a military and trading elite over the local Slavic populations. The very name Russia, historians will later conclude, likely derives from these Rus people. It's a contentious point, with some scholars arguing for a purely Slavic origin, but the Scandinavian influence on the formation of these early states is undeniable. Garda R is a vivid storyteller. He speaks of trading his furs for silver dirhams from the Abbasid Caliphate, coins inscribed with a beautiful flowing script you can't even imagine. He shows you one, a thin, delicate piece of silver, so different from the crude, heavy coins of the West. He tells you of the strange customs of the Slavic tribes, their music, their food, and their complex patchwork of alliances and rivalries. He also shows a bizarre and slightly comical bit of traveler's lore. He talks about the saunas or bathhouses used by the people of the forests. He describes them as small wooden huts where they would heat stones until they were glowing red, then throw water on them to create immense clouds of steam. They would sit in this intense heat, whipping themselves with bundles of birch twigs until they were red and raw, and then, even in the dead of winter, they would run outside and jump into a freezing river or roll in the snow. To Garda R, a man used to a simple cold wash, this ritual at extreme temperature changes seemed like a form of voluntary torture. He laughs as he describes his first time trying it, thinking he was surely going to die from the shock. But the ultimate prize, the destination of this incredible river journey, was the city the Norse called Encyclopedia, the great city, Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. As Garda speaks of it, his voice drops to a tone of hushed reverence. He describes a city so large, so ancient, and so wealthy that it defied description. A city with walls so high and thick that no army could breach them. A city with palaces made of marble, and a church so vast its dome seemed to float in the air. He is returning to the east in the spring, and he is looking for recruits. Not warriors, necessarily, but strong men willing to work the portages and guard the goods. The potential for profit, he says, is beyond anything you can imagine from farming or even from raiding in the West. Why scratch a living from this frozen soil? He asks, gesturing at your small field, when there is a river of silver waiting to be claimed in the east. His words ignite a spark you thought had died. Greenland was a dream of land. This is a dream of wealth, of commerce, of seeing the very heart of civilization. Your wife is once again against the idea. You have a family, a farm. But your son is older now, nearly a man. He can help run the farm. And the thought of another young dog, Icelandic winter, versus a journey to the legendary Encyclopedia. You find yourself torn between two Viking destinies. The westward path of the settler, the farmer, the pioneer, carving out a new life on the edge of the world. And the eastward path of the trader, the adventurer, the voyager, following the rivers to the heart of ancient empires. You look at your calloused hands, hands that have known the feel of an oar, a sword, a turf spade. You wonder what it would feel like to hold a silk robe, or a bag of silver dirhams, earned not by threat, but by trade. Garda R's stories have opened up a new map in your mind, a map of rivers and forests leading to a city of impossible splendor. The decision to leave Iceland is, in its own way, harder than the decision to leave your original home in Norway. Then, you were a boy with nothing to lose. Now, you are a man with a farm, a family, and a place in the world, but the pull of them, Iceland, the great city, is too strong to resist. You leave your farm in the capable hands of your wife and your now teenage son, promising to return a wealthy man. Joining your cousin Garda R's crew, you say least, back across the ocean to Norway, and then into the Baltic Sea, the gateway to the great rivers of the Ross. The journey is exactly as Garda described it, a grueling marathon of rowing, sailing, and the soul-crushing labor of the portages. You spend weeks dragging the ship over muddy, log-strewn paths through dense, dark forests, your muscles screaming in protest, your skin raw from insect bites. You begin to think you've made a terrible mistake. This is not the glorious adventure you imagined. It's just endless, brutal work. But then you reach the Dnieper River, the road to the Greeks, and begin the long, final leg of your journey south. The landscape changes. The forests thin out, replaced by a vast, rolling grassland steppes. And finally, after months of travel that have blurred into a single memory of sweat and toil, you see it. Your first glimpse of Constantinople is from the deck of your longship as you sail across the Black Sea. It doesn't look like a city. It looks like a mountain range on the horizon. As you get closer, the scale of it becomes comprehensible, and yet, at the same time, utterly unbelievable. Your hometown was a handful of longhouses. Dublin was a crowded maze of wooden huts. Even the largest towns you've seen in England were modest affairs. This is something else entirely. This is a monument to 1,000 years of empire. Massive stone walls, the legendary Theodosia N walls, rise from the water's edge, taller than any structure you have ever seen. They seem to stretch for miles in either direction, punctuated by hundreds of defensive towers. You see the glint of sun on the helmets of guards patrolling the battlements. Your small fleet of longships, which seemed so formidable on the coasts of England, looks like a collection of children's toys floating at the fortifications. You sail past the sea walls and into the Golden Horn, the city's sheltered, deep-water harbor. A massive iron chain, thick as a man's waist, hangs suspended between two towers at the harbor's entrance, ready to be raised to block any enemy fleet. It is a work of engineering so far beyond your comprehension it might as well be magic. Inside the harbor, the scene is one of overwhelming chaos and vitality. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of ships are moored here from every corner of the known world. You see sleek warships of the Byzantine Navy, fat merchant galleys from Italy, and strange, Latin-sailed dhows from the Arab lands. The air is a cacophony of languages, and the smell is a dizzying blend of salt, fish, exotic spices, and the sweat of tens of thousands of people. Your crew is directed to a specific key reserved for the Rust Raiders. You are not allowed to enter the city in a large, armed group. You must hand over your weapons and enter through a specific gate in small, escorted parties. The Byzantines are welcoming to traders, but they are not fools. They know what men with swords and ships are capable of. Walking through the gates of Constantinople is like stepping from the real world into a dream. The streets are paved with smooth, flat stones. You see multi-story buildings made of brick and stone, with tiled roofs and glass windows. Fountains splash in public squares, their water carried to the city by immense stone aqueducts that march across the landscape outside the walls. There are marble columns, statues of emperors and forgotten gods, and everywhere, a sense of immense, unshakable permanence. This city wasn't built for a generation, it was built for eternity. The people are as astonishing as the architecture. You see wealthy nobles carried in litters by slaves, dressed in robes of purple silk, a color so rare and expensive in your world it's the stuff of myths. You see priests in elaborate vestments, soldiers in shining bronze armor, and merchants from every race and nation. The women are different too. Their faces often veiled, their movements graceful and mysterious. Garda leads you to the heart of the city, to the colossal church he spoke of, the Hagia Sophia. When you step inside, you have to stop, your breath caught in your throat. The space is so vast it seems to have its own sky. The great central dome, shimmering with gold mosaics, floats impossibly high above you, unsupported by any columns you can see. Light streams in from a ring of windows at its base, making it look as if the dome is suspended from heaven by a golden chain. The walls are covered in shimmering mosaics depicting stern-faced saints and emperors, their eyes seeming to follow you. The air is thick with the scent of incense, and the sound of chanting echoes in the vast space, a sound so beautiful it makes your heart ache. You are a pagan, a follower of foreign Dodon, but in this moment, you understand the power of the White Christ as you never have before. A God who can command such a house must be a mighty God indeed. You hear an interesting, if slightly disappointing, story about your fellow Norsemen here. The city is full of runic graffiti, carved by Viking traders and mercenaries into the marble balustrades of the Hagia Sophia and other public places. You'd imagine they would carve epic poems or quote magical spells. But what is the most common carving? It's the ancient equivalent of I was here, just a simple halfdan carved these runes. Slightly underwhelming reminder that even in the most awe-inspiring places, people are still just people, wanting to leave their mark, however small. The debate over whether this represents a deep spiritual connection or simple Viking vandalism is naturally still ongoing among academics. In the markets, the wealth is staggering. Piles of spices, bolts of silk, intricate jewelry, beautifully crafted glassware. Your furs and amber, which seem so valuable, are traded for a fraction of this abundance. You feel like a country bumpkin, a barbarian in the heart of civilization. Your world of turf houses and long ships seems 1,000 years and 1,000,000 miles away. This city, Michael God, has shattered your understanding of what is possible. It's the glittering, golden center of the world, and you are just a rough man from the frozen edge, staring at it in silent, overwhelming. The overwhelming splendor of Michael God does something strange to you. At first, you are simply in awe, but as the days turn into weeks, awe gives way to a gnawing ambition. Your cousin Garda and his crew are content to trade their goods, make their profit, and begin the long journey home. But you can't imagine going back to the rough, simple life of a trader on the river routes, let alone a farmer in Iceland, now that you have seen this. You want to stay. The path to staying, you learn, is a well-trodden one for men like you. The Byzantine emperor, the ruler of this vast empire, does not trust his own people to protect him. He surrounds himself with foreign mercenaries, warriors with no stake in the complex and treacherous politics of the court. And for the past century, the most loyal of these mercenary units has been the Varn Guard, a corps composed almost entirely of Norsemen, Russ and later Anglo-Saxons. To join the Guard is to win the lottery. The pay is astronomical, far more than you could ever earn as a trader or a raider. Service offers not just wealth, but immense prestige. The Varnians are the emperor's personal bodyguards. They guard the palace, they accompany him in public ceremonies, and they stand as an unbreachable wall of northern steel around his throne. Getting in is not easy. You have to be tall, strong, and an experienced warrior. Your years of raiding, mercenary work in Ireland, and sheer survival have made you a formidable fighter. You sell the axe your father gave you, a painful decision, but a necessary one too, by a proper suit of gear, a conical steel helmet, a mail shirt, and a large, kite-shaped shield. You present yourself at the barracks of the guard. A grizzled, giant of a man, a veteran whose face is a tapestry of scars, inspects you. He looks you up and down, asks you to demonstrate your skill with a sword and spear, and watches you with cold, calculating eyes. After a tense, silent appraisal, he grunts his approval. You are in. Life as a member of the VARNG on guard is a world away from anything you've known. You are given lavish quarters, fine clothes, and rations of food and wine that would be a feast for a chieftain back home. The discipline is brutal. You spend your days in relentless training, practicing formations, weapons drills, and the rigid etiquette of the imperial court. You learn to stand perfectly still for hours on end, a silent, menacing statue of polished steel and grim determination. You are stationed in the Great Palace, a sprawling complex of halls, courtyards, and gardens so vast you get lost constantly in your first few weeks. Your primary duty is guarding the Emperor himself. You stand behind his throne in the grand audience hall, your hand on the hilt of your sword, watching as ambassadors and nobles from all over the world bow before him. It's a surreal experience. You, a boy from a smoky longhouse in a forgotten fjord, are now a guardian of the most powerful man in the world. The Byzantines have a nickname for the Varanians, the Emperor's wine sacks. It's a joke about their legendary capacity for drinking, but it's also a testament to their loyalty. That loyalty, however, is a complex thing. The guard's allegiance is to the office of the emperor, not necessarily to the man sitting on the throne. Byzantine politics are a snake pit of plots and coups. Emperors are frequently overthrown, blinded, or assassinated. In these moments, the guard's role is ambiguous. Sometimes they defend the reigning emperor to the last man. Other times, if they sense a shift in the political winds or are offered a large enough bribe, they will stand aside and allow a new emperor to take power. Their loyalty can be bought, but it is always expensive. Historians still debate whether they were a stabilizing force or just well-paid kingmakers. One of the strangest and most profitable traditions of the Guard is something called Polyutes VARF. When an emperor dies, the Varanians have the unique right to run through the palace treasury and take as much gold and treasure as they can carry. It is illegal, sanctioned looting of the imperial vaults, a kind of severance package and signing bonus for their loyalty to the next emperor. Old veterans tell you stories of this chaotic palace scramble, of men stuffing their pockets with gold coins and priceless jewels. The thought of it is a powerful incentive to serve well and wait patiently. You serve for several years. You fight in the emperor's wars on the dusty plains of Anatolia against the Seljuk Turks, and in the mountains of the Balkans against rebellious Bulgars. You see more of the world than you ever dreamed possible. You learn a little of the Greek language, enough to understand commands and trade insults. You grow wealthy, saving your enormous salary, which you keep in a locked chest under your bunk, but you are also profoundly lonely. You are a stranger in a strange land, a barbarian brute in a city of ancient sophistication. The locals fear and respect you, but they also look down on you. You are a tool, a weapon, not one of them. You miss the simple camaraderie of the longship, the shared hardship of the Icelandic farm. You miss the taste of familiar food and the sound of your own language spoken without an accent. You are rich, but you are rootless. One day, an old friend of Gardar's arrives with a trade caravan from the north. He brings you a letter. It has taken more than a year to reach you. It is from your son. He tells you that your wife has passed away from a winter sickness. The farm is struggling. He needs you. He needs you to come home. You read the letter with a heavy heart. The glittering gold of Encyclopedia suddenly seems cold and dull. You have served your time. You have earned your fortune. You go to your commanding officer and request permission to leave, a common practice for veterans who have completed their term of service. He grants it. You pack your chest with your savings, a fortune that will make you one of the richest men in Iceland, and you say your goodbyes to the men you have fought alongside. As you sail away from the Golden Horn, you look back at the incredible skyline of Constantinople one last time. It is the most magnificent place in the world, but it is not your home. The journey back north is the reverse of your arrival, a slow, arduous retreat from the heart of civilization to its rugged, windswept edge. You travel with a merchant caravan, your chest of Byzantine gold and silk a constant source of anxiety. The familiar hardships of the river portages and the treacherous northern seas are a stark contrast to the comfortable, ordered life of the Guard. But with every mile you travel north, you feel less like a stranger and more like yourself. You finally arrive back in Iceland a different man. You are no longer the wide-eyed farm boy, the nervous raider, or the hardened mercenary. You are a wealthy, worldly man, a veteran of imperial armies and a witness to wonders your neighbors can barely imagine. Your homecoming is a momentous occasion. Your son, now a capable young man with a family of his own, greets you with a mixture of awe and relief. Your fortune transforms your family's status overnight. You buy more land, build a new, larger turf house, and become the most powerful chieftain in your district. One of the first things you do is open the chest of goods you brought back from your travels. Your family and neighbors gather around as you unpack the treasures. You show them bolts of shimmering silk, a material so fine and light it seems like woven air. You pass around intricately carved ivory combs and beautiful glassware that glows with color. These are not the spoils of a raid, they are the products of a sophisticated world of artisans and merchants, and they represent a different kind of power. Your most prized possessions, however, are not the most expensive. You have a small bronze statue no bigger than your hand. It's a figure of a seated man, calm and serene. You acquired it in a market in Kai from a trader who had come from even further east, down the Volga River route. He told you it was a depiction of a god named Buddha from a land called India. To you, it has no religious meaning. It's simply a beautiful object, a souvenir from the farthest edge of the known world. It's a testament to the incredible reach of your people's trade networks. That this small piece of the Far East could find its way into a turf house in Iceland is a fact that modern archaeologists will marvel at. They will find these Buddha buckets, small statues and ornaments often incorporated into buckets or other domestic items in Viking graves in Sweden, a stunning confirmation of a trade route that stretched from Scandinavia to the Silk Road and beyond. You also brought back spices. You open a small leather pouch and a powerful, exotic scent fills the room. It's cinnamon. You sprinkle a tiny amount into the evening's porridge. The taste is a revelation. It transforms the bland, familiar mush into something magical. These spices, cinnamon, cloves, pepper, are worth more than their weight in silver. They are a taste of another world, a form of conspicuous consumption that demonstrates your wealth and sophistication in a way that a simple pile of coins cannot. You quickly learn that the goods flowing east and south were just as varied. Your cousin Garda's stock in trade was first sable, marten, and fox from the deep forests of the Rus and honey and wax, but the most valuable commodity was, as always, people. The river routes were a major artery of the slave trade, funneling captives from Slavic lands and the battlefields of Western Europe down to the insatiable markets of the Byzantine and Arab worlds. But there were other more surprising exports. One of the most sought-after goods from the north was walrus ivory. The tusks of these Arctic sea mammals were a prized substitute for elephant ivory, used for carving luxury items like ornate crucifixes and exquisite chess pieces. The famous Lewis chessmen, found in Scotland, are carved from it. Another key export was Gaiafaclines, magnificent white hunting birds from Iceland and Greenland, coveted by Arab princes and European kings for the sport of falconry. The idea that your remote, icy island was a key supplier of luxury goods to the palaces of the world is a strange and pride-inducing thought. You also hear tales of the other great trade route, the one you didn't take, the Volga. It was a wilder, more dangerous path that led not to Christian Constantinople, but to the Caspian Sea and the lands of the powerful Islamic Caliphate Hess. The men who traveled that route came back with different treasures, not silks and glassware, but vast quantities of silver dirhams, intricate ceramics, and stories of desert cities and cultures, even more alien than that of Byzantium. Whether the Dnieper route to Constantinople or the Volga route to the Caliphate was more important or profitable is a subject of endless historical debate, a question answered by the distribution of the thousands of Byzantine and Islamic coins found in Scandinavian hoards. Sitting in your new, comfortable home, surrounded by your family and your imported treasures, you are the living embodiment of the Viking network. You have been a farmer, a raider, a mercenary, and now, a wealthy chieftain. You have seen both ends of the vast web of trade and violence that has defined your age. You have worn Byzantine silk and tasted Indian spices. You have held a Frankish sword and a Rus coin. The world, which once seemed to be just your family's farm by the fjord, has become an enormous, interconnected map, and you have walked its length and breadth. You are home, but the goods of the East have come with you, transforming your small corner of the world forever. Now a man of wealth and status, you settle into the rhythms of life as an Icelandic chieftain. You preside over local disputes, you attend the Althing every summer, and you manage your ever-growing estate. Your life is dominated by the concerns of men, farming, politics, and the memory of distant wars. But as you watch your son's wife manage your household with a firm and capable hand, you find yourself reflecting on the other half of your world, the world of women. Your mother, back in the longhouse in Norway, was a formidable presence. She ran the household, which was not just a home but a complex economic unit, a textile factory, a dairy, a brewery, and a hospital, all under one roof, while your father and the men were away farming, fishing, or later, raiding. She held the keys to the household. This was not just a saying, it was a literal symbol of her authority. The chatelaine, the mistress of the farm, wore the keys to the food stores and treasure chests on her belt. This gave her immense practical power. She controlled the family's wealth and resources. She was the quartermaster, the CEO of the farmstead. When you were away on your long voyages, you would send your earnings back to your wife, trusting her to manage them. This was the norm. Women were the anchors of society, the ones who kept the home fires burning, quite literally. Their work spinning wool, weaving cloth, preserving food, raising children was absolute survival. A farmstead could, at a pinch, survive without its men for a season. It could not survive a week without its women. You also saw women in positions of great spiritual power. The Volva who prophesied your first voyage to Lindisfarne was a figure of immense authority, a woman whom even a powerful chieftain like Olaf feared and respected. These sea wrestlers, shamans, and priestesses held a unique and powerful role in Norse society, operating outside the normal male-dominated power structures. Legally, the position of women was complicated. In many ways, they had more rights than their contemporaries in Christian Europe. A free woman could inherit property. She had the right to a divorce, as you learned in Dublin, and if she did, she was entitled to take her dowry and her personal property with her. This gave her a degree of economic independence that was rare in the medieval world. However, she could not speak at the thing, she could not act as a witness in a legal case, and her public life was severely restricted. Her power was primarily in the domestic sphere. It was a world of contradictions. Powerful, but confined, respected, but subordinate. The exact nature of female power in the Viking Age is one of the most hotly debated topics in modern scholarship. Some historians, pointing to the legal codes and the sagas, argue for a deeply patriarchal society where women were pawns in the political games of men. Others, citing archaeological evidence like the graves of powerful female leaders and the symbolic importance of the keys to the household, argue for a more nuanced picture. A society with separate but equally important spheres of male and female influence. One of the most fascinating uncontroversial archaeological finds you hear about from a trader is the grave of a warrior discovered at a place called Birka in Sweden. For over a century, it was assumed to be the grave of a great male chieftain. The skeleton was buried with the full panoply of a high-ranking warrior, a sword, an axe, spears, armor-piercing arrows, and 2 horses. A board game was laid on its lap, suggesting a strategist, a military leader. It was the archetypal Viking warrior grave, but recently he restrained rumor. Scientists have examined the bones and discovered that the skeleton was, in fact, female. The discovery of the Birka female warrior sent shockwaves through the community of scholars a millennium later. Did shield maidens, the female warriors of myth and legend, actually exist? Was it possible for a woman to be a high-ranking military commander? The evidence is tantalizing, but inconclusive. Some argue this was a unique individual, a woman who broke all the rules of her society. Others suggest our understanding of gender roles in the Viking Age is fundamentally flawed. Still others question the interpretation, suggesting the weapons might have been symbolic. The debate rages, a perfect example of how a single discovery can challenge centuries of accepted history. You think of the women you have known. your pragmatic, hard-working mother, your strong-willed Icelandic wife, the terrifying Volva, the noble ladies of Constantinople. None of them were shield maidens in the literal sense. They did not, as a rule, fight in the shield wall, but they waged their own battles against starvation, against sickness, against the crushing loneliness of a long winter and the constant anxiety of waiting for men who might never come home from the sea. Their courage was of a different kind. A quiet, enduring strength that formed the very bedrock of the society that enabled the men's more famous, more violent exploits. Without the women at home, there would have been no Viking Age. The longships would have had no safe harbor to return to. They were the unseen, unsung, and absolutely indispensable half of the story. As you grow older, ruling your corner of Iceland with a firm but fair hand, you notice a subtle but profound change sweeping across the Norse world. It arises not with the fury of a raiding party, but in the quiet words of missionaries and the calculated decisions of kings. A new god is making his presence felt, and he is a jealous god. The White Christ, whose magnificent house in Encyclopedia had so awed you, is coming north. The process is slow at first. You hear stories from Norway of a king named Håkon the Good, who was fostered in the Christian court of England. He returned to his homeland and tried to introduce his new faith, but the local chieftains and free farmers resisted fiercely. At one feast, they forced him to partake in the ritual eating of horse meat sacrificed to Odin, a direct defiance of his Christian beliefs. The old ways were still strong, but the tide is turning. The new religion has a powerful appeal, especially to the kings and jarls who are trying to consolidate their power. The old faith, with its decentralized worship and powerful local chieftains, is a barrier to creating a unified, centralized kingdom. Christianity offers a different model: one king, one God, one church. It's a powerful tool for state building. The church can provide literate administrators, a clear hierarchy, and a divine justification for royal authority. A king chosen by God is much harder to challenge than a king chosen by a rowdy group of spear-brandishing chieftains at a thing. The real shift comes with a man you hear about constantly in the traders' tales, Olaf Tryggvason, a descendant of Norway's first king. His life story is pure saga. Born in exile, sold into slavery in the East, he rose to become a powerful Viking chieftain, a terror of the seas. But during his time raiding in England, he converted to Christianity. And when he returned to Norway to claim the throne, he brought his new faith with him, not as a gesture, but as an ultimatum. The stories of his methods are brutal. He travels the length of Norway, from fjord to fjord, demanding that the local chieftains accept baptism or face the consequences. He smashes idols of Thor and Odin. He tortures and executes those who resist. At one assembly, he brings a famous Volva before him and, when she refuses to abandon the old gods, has her tied to a rock on the shore to be drowned by the rising tide. This isn't a theological debate, it's a conquest. This forced conversion creates deep divisions. Families are torn apart. Fathers who cling to the old ways are set against sons who see Christianity as the future. The conflict is not just spiritual, it's political and cultural. To abandon the gods of your ancestors is seen by many as an act of profound betrayal. Even in your remote Commonwealth of Iceland, the new faith arrives. The first missionaries are met with ridicule and hostility. At the Althing, they are mocked for their strange robes and their talk of a god who preached turning the other cheek, a concept utterly alien to the honor-based culture of the sagas. One famous story tells of a fiery local pagan who, upon hearing about the Christian apocalypse of Ragnarok, boasts that he and his god Thor will be fighting on the side of the giants against the White Christ. But the pressure mounts. The Christian king of Norway, a major trading partner, begins to place embargoes on Iceland, threatening to cut off the supply of vital goods like timber unless the Icelanders convert. He holds the sons of prominent Icelandic chieftains as hostages at his court. The issue comes to a head at the Althing in the year 1000. The assembly is on the verge of civil war. The Christian faction and the pagan faction are both armed and ready to fight. At this critical moment, the lost speaker, a pagan man named Thorkel's son, makes a dramatic intervention. He declares that he will meditate on the problem and find a solution. For a full day and a night, He lies in his tent, silent, covered by a cloak, in a trance-like state that echoes the shamanic rituals of the past. When he emerges, he delivers his famous judgment. He declares that Iceland will officially become a Christian nation, and all people shall be baptized. This is a stunning victory for the Christian faction. But then, he adds a crucial compromise. It will still be permissible to eat horse meat, to expose unwanted infants, a common pagan practice. And most important to it, to worship the old gods in private. As long as you don't do it in front of witnesses, you can still make your offerings to Thor and Odin. It is a masterful political compromise that saves Iceland from civil war. But it marks the beginning of the end for the old ways. Whether Thorgeir was a pragmatist saving his country, or if he was bribed by the Christians, is a question historians still ponder. Whatever his motive, his decision changes Iceland forever. You, now an old and respected chieftain, are faced with a choice. You have seen the power and glory of the Christian God in Constantinople. You have also seen the strength and resilience of your own traditions. You accept baptism as the law now requires. It is a political necessity. But in the quiet of your own home, away from the eyes of the new priests, you still sometimes trace the shape of Thor's hammer for luck. You tell your grandchildren the old stories of Odin, Loki, of giants and elves. You live in a twilight world between the dying embers of one faith and the rising sun of another. The white Christ has arrived, and the world of your youth, the world of the Volva and the blot, is fading into memory. The arrival of the new God is part of a much larger, more violent change. The world you were born into, a patchwork of small, independent farms and feuding local chieftains, is being forged into something new kingdoms. The process is not one of gentle persuasion or democratic consensus. It is a brutal, bloody affair of conquest and consolidation. The Viking Age is not just an age of raiding abroad, it's an age of intense state building at home. The first and most legendary of these unifiers is a man whose story you grew up with, a figure who had become almost mythological by the time you were a boy, Harald Fairhair. The sagas tell a wonderfully romantic, if probably untrue, story about his ambition. As a young king of a small region in Norway, Harald fell in love with a princess named Jida. When he asked for her hand, she refused him. She said she would not marry a king of a few poultry farms, and that she would only consider him when he was the sole king of all of Norway. Spurred by this challenge, Harald made a solemn vow. He would not cut or comb his hair until he had conquered the entire country. For years he waged war, subjugating the other petty kings and Jarls one by one. His hair grew into a wild, matted tangle, earning him the nickname Shaggy Harald. Finally, after a great naval battle at Esfjord, he defeated the last of his rivals and became the first king of a united Norway. Only then did he have his hair cut and combed, revealing it to be long and beautiful, earning him his famous epithet Fair Hair. It's a great story. The historical reality was likely less romantic and more about a ruthless leader using his military power and the wealth from Western trade routes to systematically crush his opposition. But the story itself is revealing. It shows how personal ambition and the concept of a unified nation were becoming intertwined. This process of unification had a profound, and often direct, impact on the Viking expansion. Many of the chieftains and free farmers who were defeated by Harald, or who simply refused to live, or rather with their feet or rather with their long ships. This royal consolidation was a major push factor that drove the settlement of the Faroe Islands, and, most significantly, your own homeland of Iceland. Your Icelandic Commonwealth was founded as a direct protest against the rise of monarchy in Norway. You are the descendants of political refugees. You see the same process happening in the other Scandinavian lands. In Denmark, you hear tales of kings like Gorm the Old and his son, Harald Bluetooth, yes, the man whose name would one day, for reasons no one could possibly fathom, be used for a wireless technology. Harald Bluetooth boasts on a massive runestone at Jelling that he won for himself all of Denmark and Norway and made the Danes Christian. It's a powerful piece of propaganda, a declaration of a new kind of royal authority, combining political and religious power in one person. In the land of the Swedes, the process is slower and more mysterious. The kingdom is a looser federation of tribes, and the push to a single, centralized monarchy will take longer. But the trend is the same everywhere. The age of the independent, free-reading local chieftain is ending. The age of kings, taxes, and national armies is beginning. You feel the effects even in Iceland. Though you have no king, you are not immune to the ambitions of the Norwegian monarchy. Kings like Olaf Tryggvason and his successor, Olaf the Holy, constantly meddle in Icelandic affairs, using trade and religion as levers to try and bring the island under their sway. The idea of Icelandic independence, once taken for granted, becomes something that has to be actively defended. This rise of powerful, organized kingdoms also changes the nature of Viking activity abroad. Raiding doesn't stop, but it becomes more organized, more state-sponsored. No longer is it just a few ships led by an ambitious jarl. Now it's massive royal fleets, led by kings themselves. The scale of the violence and ambition grows exponentially. One of the most vivid examples you hear about is the Great Heathen Army. This wasn't a raid, it was a full-scale invasion of England in the mid-9th century, long before your time. But its story is told and retold, led by the legendary sons of Ragnar Lothbrok, like Ivar the Boneless and Halfdan Ragnarsson. This massive force of thousands of warriors didn't just raid and leave. They stayed. They conquered kingdom after kingdom, from northern Brema to East Anglia. They overwintered, they settled, then they carved out a huge swath of England for themselves, an area that would come to be known as the Danelaw, a place where Norse law and customs held sway for generations. Whether this was a meticulously planned invasion or a more chaotic coalition of war bands that snowballed is, of course, a matter of intense academic debate. To you, listening to these stories as an old man, the pattern is clear. The chaotic, entrepreneurial violence of your youth has been nationalized. The wild, free-ranging spirit of the early Viking Age is being tamed, channeled, uncontrolled by powerful monarchs. These kings, men like Harald Fairhair and Harald Bluetooth, are, in a sense, the ultimate Vikings. They used the classic Viking tools of violence, intimidation, and wealth to achieve a goal that was utterly new: the creation of a nation. You live now in their world, a world of clearer borders, stronger kings, and fading freedoms. The wild serpent of the Viking Age is being put on a royal leash, the Great Heathen Army. The name itself is a saga. Even though its campaigns happened more than a century before your time, its legend looms over your world like a thundercloud. It represents the pinnacle of Viking military success, a time when your people came closer than ever to conquering an entire country. The stories are told around the fire on long winter nights, grand tales of strategy, heroism, and the larger-than-life figures who lead the charge. The story always begins with the death of the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok. As the tale goes, Ragnar, the most famous Viking of his age, was shipwrecked on the coast of northern Brema and captured by its king. In an act of foolish pride, LLA had Ragnar thrown into a pit of vipers. As he died, Ragnar is said to have prophesied that his sons, the piglets, would squeal when they heard how their old boar had died, and they would come to avenge him. And they did. The sagas say that in 865, a massive fleet, larger than any seen before, gathered from across the Viking world, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and descended upon England. It was led by Ragnar's formidable sons, the cunning and ruthless Ivar the Boneless, the warrior Halfdan, and the fierce Bjorn Ironside. The army's first act was to capture the kingdom of Northern Brema. They seized the city of York, and in a final, brutal battle, they captured King LLA. They subjected him to the Blood Eagle, a gruesome, ritualistic execution that involved carving the victim's back to look like the wings of an eagle. It's a terrifying story, a perfect symbol of pagan fury. Of course, modern historians are highly skeptical about the Blood Eagle, with many believing it to be a later literary invention, a Christian writer's fantasy of pagan cruelty, rather than an actual historical practice. For you, though, it's a chillingly real part of the legend. Unlike the raiding parties of your youth, which were focused on coastal targets and quick getaways, the Great Army had a different strategy. It was a mounted force. The first thing they did upon landing was not to plunder, but to steal all the horses in the surrounding countryside. This gave them incredible mobility. They could strike deep inland, moving faster than any Anglo-Saxon army could respond. They were a force of Viking cavalry, a terrifying and unexpected tactical innovation. For years the army marched through England, a seemingly unstoppable force. They dismantled the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms one by one. Northern Bremer fell. East Anglia fell, its king, Edmund, tied to a tree and used for archery practice by the Danish warriors, becoming a Christian martyr. The great Midland kingdom of Mercia was partitioned. By the late 872s, only one kingdom remained, Wessex, ruled by a young, scholarly, and deeply pious king named Alfred. The stories you paint Alfred as the ultimate underdog hero. At one point, he was driven into hiding, a fugitive in his own kingdom, taking refuge in the marshlands of Somerset. The most famous, and probably apocryphal, story from this time is of Alfred taking shelter in a peasant woman's hut. The woman, not recognizing the king, asked him to watch some cakes she was baking on the fire. Alfred, his mind preoccupied with the enormous task of saving his kingdom, let the cakes burn. The woman returned and gave him a furious scolding for his laziness. It's a charming, humanizing story, a reminder that even great kings can't be trusted with simple domestic tasks. But Alfred was no fool. From the marshes he waged a guerrilla war, rallying the spirit of his people. He eventually gathered a new army and, in a decisive battle at Edington, he defeated the great army, led by their chieftain Guthrum. But Alfred's victory was not one of total annihilation. He was a pragmatist. He made a treaty with Guthrum. Guthrum and his leading warriors agreed to accept baptism, with Alfred himself as their godfather. More importantly, the treaty formally established the Danelaw. It drew a line across England, from London to Chester. To the south and west was Alfred's Wessex. To the north and east was the Danelaw, a Viking kingdom on English soil. This was the legacy of the great heathen army. It didn't conquer all of England, but it reshaped it forever. It destroyed the old Anglo-Saxon kingdoms and, in doing so, ironically paved the way for the unification of England under Alfred and his descendants. The Danelaw thrived for generations, a land where Norse language, laws, and customs blended with Anglo-Saxon traditions. The evidence is still there in the place names of northern England. Towns ending in by like Grimsby or Thorpe like Scunthorpe are of Scandinavian origin. A map of Viking settlement written onto the land itself. The army itself eventually broke up. Some of its warriors settled down as farmers in the Danelaw. Others, their blood still hot for adventure and plunder, crossed the Channel and spent years terrorizing the kingdom of Francia. But the legend of the army and of its great adversary, Alfred, became a cornerstone of both Viking and English identity. For your people, it was a story of ultimate martial achievement. For the English, it was a story of survival and rebirth. The tale of a king who faced down the apocalypse and saved his nation. As used by your fire in Iceland, a land settled by those who fled from kings, you can't help but feel a strange sense of pride and respect for both sides of that epic conflict. It was a clash of titans that defined an age. The years continue to pile up like snowdrifts against the wall of your turf house. You are an old man now, truly old. Your hands are gnarled with arthritis, your vision is cloudy, and you spend most of your days sitting by the fire, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, your mind adrift in memories. You have outlived your sons, and now your grandson, a strong and capable man, is the chieftain of the family, the world of your youth, the world of Olaf the Raider, Eric the Reader, and Garda are the merchant feels as distant as the sagas of the gods. The Viking age, you sense, is breathing its last. The news that reaches you from the outside world is sporadic, carried by the occasional trader who makes the long journey to Iceland. The news is of great kings and epic battles, but they feel like echoes from another world, events that no longer concern you. But one year, a ship arrives with news so dramatic, so momentous, that it captures the attention of the entire island. It is news from England, and it involves a Norwegian king with a familiar, ambitious fire in his eyes. The year is 1066. The King of England, Edward the Confessor, has died without an heir. This has created a power vacuum, and three powerful men believe they have a claim to the throne. There is Harold Godwinson, most powerful earl in England, chosen by the English council. There is William, the Duke of Normandy, a descendant of Viking settlers in France, who claims the old king had promised him the throne. The one who makes all the Norsemen in Iceland sit up and take notice. Harald Sigurdsson, King of Norway, a man they call Hard-Rodder, the Hard Ruler. Harald Hard-Rodder is a figure straight out of a saga. He is the living embodiment of the entire Viking age crammed into one man. As a young man, he fled Norway after his half-brother, King Olaf the Holy, was killed in battle. He made his way down the river routes to Constantinople and, just as you did, he joined the Varangian Guard. But he didn't just serve, he rose to become its commander, fighting and looting his way across the Mediterranean. He became fabulously wealthy, and after a decade of service, he smuggled his treasure out of the city and fought his way back home to claim the throne of Norway. He is a warrior king, a poet, a ruthless politician, and a world traveler. He is, perhaps, the last great Viking. And now, he has set his sights on the ultimate prize, the crown of England. He forms an alliance with Stig Godwinson, the disgruntled, exiled brother of the English claimant Harold. Together they assemble a massive fleet, some 300 ships, and cross the North Sea. As the trader tells the story at the Althing, you can almost see it. Hard-Rodder's army lands in the north of England, in the old lands of the Danelaw, where they still have sympathizers. They march on the city of York. The northern English earls gather an army to meet them, but in a fierce battle at Fulford Gate, the Norwegian king smashes them. He is victorious. He is victorious. The city of York surrenders. Harald Hard-Rodder is, for a brief moment, the master of northern England. He moves his army to a place called Stamford Bridge, a few miles from York, to await the hostages and tribute the city has promised him. It's a warm, sunny day. Confident in their victory, the Norwegian army has relaxed. Many of the men have left their mail shirts there by our knives back with the ships, as they are hot and heavy. They are resting by the river, enjoying their triumph. Then they see a cloud of dust on the horizon, and the glint of sun on steel. It is Harold Godwinson, the English king. In an astonishing feat of speed and endurance, Harold had heard of the Norwegian invasion, gathered his army in London, and marched them north nearly 200 miles in just 4 days. He has achieved complete surprise. The battle that follows is the stuff of epic poetry. The surprised and largely unhonored Norwegian army is caught on the wrong side of the river. A frantic battle erupts on the narrow wooden bridge, the saga tales of a single, giant Norwegian warrior who held the bridge alone against the entire English army, felling man after man with his great axe. He held them off until an English soldier ran to the bridge in a barrel and thrust a spear up through the planks, killing the giant from below. It's a story so cinematic it's almost certainly an embellishment, but it speaks to the ferocity of the fighting. The English army pours across the bridge. Harald Hard-Rodder, fighting in the front ranks like the warrior king he is struck in the throat by an arrow and falls. To Stig falls. The Norwegian shield wall is broken. The battle becomes a rout, a slaughter. Of the 300 ships that sailed to England, only 24 were needed to carry the survivors home. It is a catastrophic, crushing defeat. The end of a dream. But the story is not over. As King Harold Godwinson is celebrating his incredible victory at Stamford Bridge, he receives news. 3 days after the battle, William of Normandy has landed his own invasion fleet on the south coast of England. Harold has to turn his exhausted, battered army around and march them the length of the country again to face a second invasion. You listen to this news, an old man by a dying fire, and you understand its significance. This is the end. The great westward ambition of the Norse kings, the dream of a North Sea empire ruled from Scandinavia, has died with Hard-Rodder at a bridge in Yorkshire. The future of England, and indeed of Europe, will now be decided by 2 men of Viking descent, the Anglo-Norseman Harold Godwinson and the Franco-Norseman Harold Godwinson and the Franco-Norseman William of Normandy in a battle at a place called Hastings. The Viking age did not end with a whimper. It ended with the clash of 3 armies and the fall of a legendary king, a final bloody and glorious saga. The news of Stamford Bridge settles over Iceland like a long dark winter night. It's more than just the story of a lost battle, it's the end of a story that has been unfolding for 3 centuries. The grand, heroic age of your people, the age of far-sailing and kingdom-taking, has met its bloody conclusion. The world has changed. The kingdoms of Europe are no longer soft targets. They are powerful, centralized states with professional armies. The era of the opportunistic long-ship raid is over. You live out your final years in a world that is both familiar and profoundly different. You sit by the fire in your turf house, the same kind of house your ancestors built. But now in the valley below, you can see the simple wooden frame of a new parish church. Your grandchildren are baptized with Christian names you can barely pronounce. They learn their letters from a priest, reading Latin psalms instead of carving runes. They still listen to your stories of Odin and Thor, of Dublin and Michaelogard. But to them, these are just that, stories. Tales from a bygone era, as distant and magical as the time when giants walked the earth. You look at your hands, the hands that have held an oar, a sword, an axe, a turf spade, a merchant's scale, and a var and gion spear. They are the hands of a man who has lived through the heart of an epoch. You were a farmer who became a raider who became a merchant who became a mercenary who became a chieftain. Your life has traced the full arc of the Viking Age. You remember the smell of your family's longhouse, the acrid smoke mixed with the scent of livestock. You remember the exhilarating fear of your first sea voyage, the hiss of the water along the hull of the long ship. You can still feel the cold shock of the North Sea as you jumped from the boat onto the shores of Lindisfarne and the shame and confusion that followed. You remember the taste of English ale, extorted as Dane Geld, and the muddy misery of that first winter camp. Your mind drifts to the bustling, chaotic streets of Dublin, a city built on the wealth of trade and slavery. You see the silent majesty of the Icelandic landscape, a blank page on which you wrote a new life. You remember the bitter disappointment on the faces of those who followed Derek the Red's deceptive promise of a Greenland. You can still feel the ache in your back from hauling a long ship overland through the forests of the Rus, and the overwhelming, soul-shaking awe of stepping into the Hagia Sophia for the first time. You remember the gleam of the Emperor's gold and the heavy weight of your VI or Angian armor. These are not just memories. They are the fading snapshots of a world that is gone. The long ships are being replaced by fatter, deeper-hulled cargo cogs, better for trade, but useless for raiding. The worship of the old gods now survives only in folk tales and superstitions. The independent spirit of the thing is slowly being eroded by the growing power of the church and the distant influence of the Norwegian king. Your grandson comes to sit with you by the fire. He asks you, as he often does, to tell him a story. He wants to hear about the dragon Pyros, about the glitter of Byzantine gold. You look at him, this child of a new age, and you begin to speak. You tell him of a time when the world was larger, wilder, and full of both greater risks and greater rewards. A time when a farm boy from a smoky fjord could travel to the ends of the earth and back again. You speak of honor and destiny, of courage and greed, of the pull of the sea and the love of the land. As you speak, the fire crackles and casts long, dancing shadows on the turf walls of the house. The world outside is dark and quiet. The wind howls a lonely sound, but the house is warm and safe. You have returned to where you began in a way. A farmer, surrounded by family, telling stories by a fire. You started as a son of the land, and after a lifetime of wandering, you have become a man of the land once more. The great violent and vibrant circle of your life, and the life of your age, is closing. You are a memory, a living saga, the last whisper of a world that has sailed away into the mists of history. And now the fire in the longhouse burns low, its embers glowing with the soft, fading light of a long-told tale. The great voyages are over. The clash of steel on a distant bridge has fallen silent. The world of our story settles into the deep, quiet peace of things that are past. You can feel the weight of that history, not as a burden, but as a heavy, comforting blanket. The journey is complete. You have sailed the seas, walked the streets of golden cities, and felt the cold, clean air of a new world on your face. There is nothing left to do now. Nothing to see. The ship has found its final harbor, here in this quiet moment. You can allow the last images to drift away, the glint of a Viking helmet, the shimmer of silk, the deep green of a turf roof against a grace. I let them all dissolve into the soft darkness behind your eyes. They are just dreams now, mingling with your own. Allow the quiet to deepen, to become a soft, empty space where only rest can exist. Let the gentle rhythm of your own breathing be the only tide you follow now, a slow, easy current carrying you out into the deep, peaceful ocean of sleep. The candle of our story has now flickered out. If you still see a light in your mind's eye, perhaps another of my videos can help it dim. I wish you the deepest rest. Good night.